Yeah,
Anyways,
Mark's a great guy. I'll never forget Mark.
yeah, great guy. Um, so anyways, we just like to say, I know we still have people coming in right now, and I sure it will for the next 10, 15 minutes. But I think I'd just like to start by saying welcoming people to our show here, the Winnipeg UFO experiencers and researchers. Our group has been going for nearly 10 years, started by Grant Cameron, and we had a couple other people that we were sort of associated with, and then he dumped it on my plate.
You have bigger shoulders than I do.
Well, I got a bigger stomach too, but I'm not sure if that gets me to carry the ball. But anyways, I'd just like to say that tonight we got a really special guest, and we've got a great interviewer as well. Both probably familiar with the people that are going to be in this show, and I know I see people coming in steadily into the show tonight. And this Chris, for your knowledge, will be recorded, and we started a website and put it up, so we can send you a link to that if you ever want to see it or deal with it. But I'd like to first introduce Grant Cameron here, who is going to be our interviewer tonight. Grant's something that we're very familiar with and have had many great discussions. Matter of fact, I interviewed him about 2 months ago, Chris, and I said 5 words during the interview. So it worked just great.
That's an easy one, right?
Yeah. And Chris Bledsoe is somebody Grant and I met, boy, oh boy, I don't know how long ago that was, 7 years or more ago, I guess.
2013, 10 years ago.
Yeah. 2013, 10 years ago. Wow, that's how time goes along here. So it's anyways, I just welcome Chris Bledsoe to our show, and I know there's many people that were excited to hear that you were going to come in and join us. So many unique experiences that we've talked about, and I know Grant has shared a lot of the stuff he said when he was at your place, that sort of thing, but I'm sure we'll touch on all of it. So just to move on, just to drop this to Grant and let him take over. Thanks, Grant, for coming and doing this.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mark. It's an honor to talk to my friend Chris Bledsoe. We actually met a little bit before you met him. We met back in a thing called The Gathering, which Chris will remember. A good friend of his in Philadelphia had an event. And I remember we came on the bus. They were moving us with buses from the airport to the hotels. And I really didn't know who Chris was. I just knew there was a bunch of people on the bus who were all gathered around him, and he was talking, and he seemed to be like this super famous guy. I don't know who he was. And his wife, Yvonne, was sitting right behind me. And so I was talking to her. And I remember her saying, well, this isn't my thing. This is Chris's thing. Here's my daughter. Well, look at my daughter sing. And she had this little video. Her daughter's singing and dancing. And Chris is busy in the back of the bus with all these people. And so what happened was we did. I don't think we really talked that much. I talked mostly to Yvonne during the event, which is kind of a weird event. We just sort of walked around the whole weekend. Nobody really did anything, just sort of ate and talked to each other. And so in 2013, when I had the honor of actually getting to experience Chris Bledsoe. So you can hear Chris Bledsoe's stories. You can hear the stories of any experiencer. But when you're actually there and it actually happens, so 2013 at Citizens Hearing, and I'm going to Florida to lecture, and I realized I'm going to go right past Chris Bledsoe's house. And I phoned him up and I said, Chris, I'm going to drive right past your house. Can I stop and see you? And he says, well, absolutely sure. And Chris has the most hospitable person in the world. He had times when he had people camping out, big campsites in his yard. He tried to be as helpful to everybody to acquaint them with the story. So I came by, he took me around, he showed me where this big event that he's going to talk about happened in 2007. And then we had a couple of experiences. And the last one that we'll probably get into involved Nellie, his black lab. And when that happened, that was like, this is the real deal. There's no doubt. It's like, wow, this guy is tapped into something. So Chris has had a very rough ride going to the top of the mountain here. He's been watched by a lot of people, by government. He has a very important story, and I'm honored that he has the time to share with us. And I would tell everybody for the first little while, I'll also ask questions, but get your questions ready, say an hour or two, where you can ask them what you want. You may have heard some stories and wanted to clarify things. And I think it'll be well worth your time. This is, I think, what you're talking, maybe to start talking about your book, UFO of God. It's one of the biggest spiritual books that's been written, big time bestseller. And it was this story that it started at the beginning. I don't think you were really too happy about the story when it first started. You were sort of praying to God to get you out of this thing, and it's turned into a completely different story. So start there about the book, and then maybe get into when it all starts back in 2007.
Well, I just published the book 5 months ago. I actually wrote it in from August the 28th of 2022, and was published by February 19th of 2023. So I did it in 6 months. But I actually had some legwork that was put into it. Well, let's just say Easter of 2022 that year, I walked outside, and my friend David, he's my manager now, David Broadwell. He worked with the federal government. John Alexander referred him to come see me because David had had an experience and he didn't know what had happened. Long story short, he comes, and when he does, we're sitting in my house, and this guy is very smart. He's from Johns Hopkins University. He graduated there, and brilliant guy, wonderful family man. And we're sitting there, and I said, David, I said, they're here now. You want to see them? And he opened the front door. He's sitting by the door and across facing, but he goes out the door first, and there were two up above the house, a couple 100 feet hovering there. And one of them, they both actually moved on across the pond, and he filmed them with his cell phone. He said, my God, he said, John Alexander told me you could do that, and I just witnessed it. He said, how did you know we were there? I said, I heard them. They speak to me. And so it was David that started pushing me to write this book. You need to do it. And he kept encouraging me, and I wasn't into it. I was too busy, raising my grandchild and having fun. The book seemed like a mountain after coming over this. This RA had nearly killed me by 2020, and I've been recovering from that. And so I had a struggle to think, should I do it? So what I'm going to say is I walked outside this shop with this little camera. This is a Psionics. This is what everybody fusses about because it's only 720p. It's not high definition, and the only way you can focus it is one time you get it right and you leave it. So a lot of people fuss about me moving about and the clarity, but I do the best I can with what I got. But what I was going to say is I walk out, and David had just rang me and said, look, you need to do this. You need to seriously consider it. And I looked up at the sky and I said, should I do this? I need your answer. And immediately an orb appeared over the pond. I took that little camera and I pointed it at it. And as I'm looking through the camera, you use one eyepiece, right? So I'm looking, and I could see up above something coming down out of the sky. It was coming down fast, and it's red, blood red, and it rolls into this lighter orange, and the colors were going through it, red and orange. And as it got closer and closer, it was up there where the stars are, it looked like. And now it's dive bombing me, and I see these big old wings pull out, and they start doing this. And I'm filming this, right? I'm like, oh my God, what is that? It's glowing orange. And when it gets over top of me, it turns to white, glowing white. It makes a big turn, and it looks as big as an airplane to the eye. And it flaps its wings and flies south out of sight. So I said, that's the answer I'm looking for. So I set my jaw to writing that book. And we immediately got to work. David helped me with the legwork at Amazon while I did all the writing. I wrote 140,000 words and couldn't use but 85,000 or so because of, the size of the book got too big. And they were recommending you need to stay at this size to be able to sell it at the best sellers. And so anyhow, that's how it arrived at that size. And that's the biggest thing I wanted to say. It was something with wings that was glowing, convinced me to write this book. And that was probably I wasn't prepared for what has happened since, because it's opened the floodgates to interest from everywhere, all foreign governments to Hollywood, to a lot more. History Channel, we just did a deal with them. So the book's UFO of God, and you can get it on my website, ufoofgod.com, through Amazon. There's a link there. So let's rewind to 2007. That's, I guess, we give a little short story, if that's what you want me to do, how it all started. Is that what we... So in 2007, I'd just come through a near-death experience in 05, early 05, because of I was poisoned by a doctor who actually overdosed on drugs. He got to taking his own medication and abusing it, and ended up injuring 113 of his patients. And I was one. I was the 113th, because when I came out, I was in the hospital, covered up head to toe. And I came up out of my body, and I could see my wife sitting there, and 3 doctors walked in the room, and I heard them speak. I heard their names. I heard them talk to my wife. I knew who they were, and I'm looking from the ceiling down on them. And then I came back in my body and sat up, and don't remember much after that. But that my Crohn's was still in a bad way. I just came through that. So I was at the lowest point of my life, ready to give up. And a year later, my father we had moved next door to him. I'm broke. I had no money. I couldn't afford to buy lunch for my children. And I just moved out of $1 million home with a pool in the back. 20 years, I've been a successful builder. But when the World Trade Center disaster happened, it caught me with 72 houses under construction, and the interest rates were 9.5% back then on commercial money. And I was spending about $1,000 a month every house in interest alone. So there was tens of thousands of dollars a month going out, plus the overhead of my company. So I watched the slow motion train. That started in 01, and by 07, 05, I was near dead. And by December, well, let's say October of 06, I'd already moved by Dad for a year, and he had convinced me to go to the beach and manage a job. Just at least try it, son. At least you got to get out of this bed. I was giving up on life, sick, still sick. And I had to say this so everybody knows where I was and what the meaning of how it all happened. This is the most important thing about this. So I went to the beach in late 06 for 4 months. The job was almost done by Christmas. We had nothing but a punch list to do after Christmas. And I'd done a walkthrough with them, and we had the punch list. So after New Year's, I sent the guys back down there to finish up and bring the rest of the money home, which was 10% of the job. And they called me at lunchtime on that January the 8th of 07, that day. It was about lunchtime, and said, we're finished with the job and we're heading home. We want to celebrate. They'd been gone 4 months out of town, and asked me to take them fishing. And my wife was at with her mom and the other children. Junior was home with me. And so we agreed. We had the time, we would go fishing with them. But nobody knew what I was thinking, right? I didn't dare let anybody know I was suffering with these terrible thoughts. And so when we got to the river, it was about 2:30. Got them doing what a good foreman would do. Mark understands. You arrange everybody, you get everybody going. And I thought I had them set up. They had their cooler, they had their fishing poles, and they're all four sitting on the bank. I said, well, I'm going to walk in the woods and go look for wildlife and just sit by a tree. I'll be back just before dark. I didn't let them know I was struggling with my thoughts, right? So, and where we were, if you can imagine a cornfield on the left-hand side, driving down the highway is a big cornfield, 200 yards across. You drive across the cornfield on a two-road road, a farmer's road or driveway, and with mud holes in it. And when you get to the far side of the field is the woodline. And down you go in the woods, and you lose 100 foot of elevation in an eighth of a mile. You run into the river and you make a right and you go an eighth of a mile parallel to the river. It deads in a grassy cul-de-sac, about an acre. So I'd walked in the back of the cul-de-sac. It's important to understand. I came out just before dark, about 4:30. It was already dark in the woods because the sun sets at 5:30 and the canopy just shuts the woods out so it gets dark early. I came back up to where they were fishing and I said, hey guys, do you want to go home or you want to fish some more? They're like, we just got here. We want to fish some more. I said, okay, let's get a fire going. So everybody put their poles down. They had these little wooden sticks with a fork and they laid there sitting on the bank with their poles up. And we all hustled around that acre of grass, picking up logs and deadfall, and had a pile of wood this high, about 5 foot high, I guess. It went over my head, but it was up that high. And the fire next to it. And when I left, I said, look, it was 10 after 5. I'm going to walk up to the field. I'm going to sit up there and watch the sunset and see if any wildlife comes out, and I'll see you back about dark. They said, okay. So when I left, they had a fire going at their back, about 4 or 5 feet behind them. And they're sitting there facing the river and the fire right behind them. And my truck's up on the hill. It was like a 10-foot embankment. You had to walk down to the water. So my truck's up there behind them. And it's pointing toward the back of the cul-de-sac. That was one of the first clues I knew that they wasn't lying to, because my truck was smoked. I drove it in there and I knew where I parked it. And so when I left walking, I walked down that path. I had to go an eighth of a mile parallel to the river and then go up the hill an eighth of a mile. And the weirdest thing is I've hunted all my life. I started hunting when I was 5. I killed one of the biggest bears in North America. And I'm in the Boone and Crockett record book for 660-pound black bear. I shot him from 6 foot. I wasn't afraid of much in the woods. But something really got me right after I left them walking. That eighth of a mile, when the grassy cul-de-sac ended, there were trees that were grown over like a tunnel over the road. So I had to go down through that tunnel, and it's kind of dark in there. And it's real thick on the edges. Everywhere in North Carolina, if it's a thick forest, the forest will be open, but unless it's a swamp, and the edges will be real thick where the sunlight gets to it. It's just shrubs, and you got to battle your way to see. But once you get in there, it opens up. But I hadn't walked 50 yards down that path, 50 feet, I mean, not yards, 50 feet down that path when I heard something walking alongside of it. And I thought, I had a happy feeling, a spark of a wildlife, maybe it's a deer. And as I stopped for a second, when I did, it stopped. Thought that was strange. So I started walking again, and it started walking. Then I began to think, maybe it's a turkey, because it sounded like 2 feet. I stopped and it stopped. And I'm trying to pull the weeds back, look in the forest, couldn't see nothing. Well, it started doing that, and it did it 3 more times. And it got me so weirded out that I got on my knees and I'm trying to look underneath the brush to see what is 10 feet in there, following me and stopping when I stopped. And so when I got to turn, the road faced west. Now the sunlight, or the skylight, the sun's already set, the skylight is coming down that path. And so I felt this sense of relief. I'm out of that dark tunnel. I'm not hearing this sound now. And I kind of forgot about it for a second. I shook it off and I started up that hill. And I'm having to watch my steps because it's real muddy and real thick, and grass is knee high in places, foot high most of the place, and the ruts are deep and muddy. And it's just so every step I had to watch where I stepped. I'd look up the hill and I'd take a few steps. I'd look up, and when I got about 40 feet from the top of that hill, I began to see the top of the sun. At least that's what I thought. And so I looked down, I took a few more steps, and I looked up and I could see more of it. I thought, strange. And I looked down, I took a couple more steps, and when I looked up again, that ain't the sun. That's the first thing I thought. And so I kind of ducked down and I come up a few more steps, and now my peripheral view is widening out, and I see two of these. And they're on the far side of the field, about 100 yards past the road. And there were only 150 feet at most in the air. And there were two, what I described as the setting sun. I described that 16, almost 17 years ago. And the funny thing is, you know, the Fatima kids, they describe, and the people, the report was the setting sun. It looked like the setting sun came down out and dried them out, right? That was one clue that got the attention of the church, the Vatican. Just one, and there was a lot more. So fear set in to where my whole body started becoming tingling and shivers, and I'm afraid, right? And I ducked down because I still got hill in front of me. The gate's up there. I'm not to the level spot yet, but I could use the hill to hide. I thought I was high. So I stood up or enough that I could peep up, and there they were. And what I'm not telling is I was at the bottom of my barrel. And the whole time I was there, when I left at 3:30, into the forest, come out at 4:30, and my way up there, and a week, 2 weeks before, I've been praying every day, Lord, help me. I don't like the pain. I don't like it where I'm at. I'm sick. I'm basically an invalid at that point and unable to work, unable to function. I'm in the bed. I'm in the bathroom 20 times a day, 25 times. I'd count it. And sick, really sick. So I was thinking the unthinkable, I have to admit, because it was part of this story. I was desperate, and I'm crying out to whoever's up there, I need help. And I didn't know they were going to come in the form of these great big fireballs the size of 50 foot across, or a UFO. And that's why my book says UFO of God, because I was praying to God and UFOs came. That's important to understand. And so I got to where I couldn't take any more of it. I was so afraid. I'm a commercial rated pilot. I knew what I was looking at wasn't from this planet. I'm very familiar with aircraft identification. I live near Fort Bragg. I've seen about everything they got. And I knew this wasn't anything from this world, because there were 40 to 50 foot balls of fire, and they were swirling constantly, and flames just shooting off and evaporating as they went out. The color of the sun, when you can look at it and it doesn't hurt your eyes, tangerine, blood red, orange. So I decided, I started thinking about Chris Jr. He's back down there with them guys fishing. Man, they're not going to believe this. And I started to get worried about him and about my safety. And I decided to run. I made the direct decision, I'm going to run. And when I did that, when I just started to make the motion, I started standing up, which exposed me to them. And I turned my body down the hill, and I had to look back one more time. So when I turned back to look, that's when everything changed. And that's when the shock of my life happened. I mean, you can see a UFO or an orb, that's one thing. See something fly by, a light in the sky, it'll wake you up and change you to realize that we're not alone. But when that thing reacts to you and says, I see you, and you're not going to get away, oh my God, I can't tell you what it did to me when I turned to run and I looked back. A third one up here above me appeared and shot down in front of me so fast that I just panicked. It shut me down. It scared me so bad. I knew that they knew I was there. I knew that I was something was going to happen. I just knew it. And that was the whole thing that forever. And this was daytime. This is not night. This is not a dream. This is not through a regression. This happened in the broad daylight, and there were 4 other witnesses to it after I got back. They even saw the same craft. So the next thing I remember is I'm panicking. I got to get down there to see my son. I got to see these guys. And I see the fire, the last 50 feet. I don't know how I got down that whole trail back to me. I don't remember it. I remember the last 50 feet. And when I got up to the fire, I could see there wasn't no more wood left. The fire was only, just a little small fire. And 3 men standing there looking down at it. And I didn't even notice Chris wasn't there yet. And so I trotted on up to them. And I'm like, hey, and they saw me coming out of the dark because I didn't have a flashlight. I could see them by the fire, but they couldn't see me. And when I got within viewing distance of them, I said, hey, guys, kind of startled them. I said, you won't never believe what I just saw. I wanted to tell them about UFO. And they're like, where in the, and I'm not going to use the words they use, have you been? We have been looking you all night. And I'm like, you're freaking kidding. I just up at the field. And I began to argue with them. No, you've been gone all night. Look at your truck. My truck was completely turned around and moved. It wasn't even in the same place. And they began to tell me that one guy stayed at the fire while 2 got in my truck. And Chris Jr. had walked back in the cul-de-sac the way I went earlier that day looking for him. And they lost him. I said, well, how long has he been gone? 2 hours. I said, oh my God. Just shock that happened to me on the hill. I didn't know what had happened, but it was still in my mind fresh. It just happened. I didn't know 4 hours was gone. I didn't know that for a long time. I had to be proven that. But so I take off running and looking for Chris Jr. And when I got to the back of the cul-de-sac, I'd shout for him, and the woods are thick, real thick, like shrubs, like you'd have in front of your house, that type shrub. But they're overgrown and 6, 7 foot high. So I went to parting the shrubs, trying to get my way in the forest, shouting for him, panic. And I heard him moving on the ground, and he stood up, grabbing onto me. And he's in shock, and he's not happy one bit. And he's in real shock. He's actually shivering. His eyes are big. He said, oh my God, Dad, why'd you leave me? I said, I didn't leave you, son. I just was up at the field. No, Daddy, you've been going all night. That's what he was telling me. I'm like, no, I won't, son. I was just up at the field. I haven't been gone 20 minutes. I'm telling you, Dad, you've been gone all night. These creatures, they had me. I couldn't move. I've been paralyzed. And he's telling me this. I'm starting to freak out. Oh my Lord, what do I do? I couldn't, I was shell shocked. I don't know what they did for 4 hours, and my whole time was only 20 minutes. Right? They saw 3 UFOs, and I'm hearing the struggle they all had. So I grabbed him by the arm, and I lead him to the truck, and he's like, I want to go home. I want to go home, Dad. I want to please take me home. I said, well, let's go over to these guys, and we'll get them loaded up. So we walk over to the fire. And remember, they couldn't see us coming because we didn't have a flashlight. You could see them, but they couldn't see us. So we just made our way to them, and they could hear us talking. They could hear Junior how upset he was. And one of the guys there actually saw an orb, a red orb, cross the path, and it freaked him out. And he didn't want to talk about it much. And Junior kept asking him during the time I was gone, before he got lost, did you see that? Did you see it? So they knew something was there. What had happened with Junior, and it ties into what scared me walking along that path. As I was walking that path on the way out, I'm hearing something tracking me. When Junior went to the back of the cul-de-sac, remember the road is 1/8 of a mile down, parallels the river an eighth of a mile, and then you got a big acre cul-de-sac, which is 75 yards across. So you got an eighth of a mile and 75 yards. So he could see all the way down that path from where he was standing. And he saw an orb come out of the woods, two of them, two red balls of light, cross the path. So he runs over to the fire. He has to go towards them to get to the fire because it's up ahead on the right. He tells them about the orbs, and they're like, come on, Jim, don't mess with us. There ain't nothing out there. So he's looking dead. He runs back, and then he comes back to them. And that's what got him to look at me, because the junior's pressing them to go look for him. So two of them jumped in the truck and took off. Junior goes back to the back of the cul-de-sac, and these two balls of light come out of the woods on the riverside. They were down on the riverbank. They come up back on the road and come all the way towards him. And the closer they got, the more he tried to hide. And he laid down on the ground and backed himself up under those thick shrubs. And they come all the way to him. Two orbs about this big around. That's what they look like. About like a softball or a little, orange maybe. And they got right up to him. And they could see him. And when he could see them, he knew they were looking at him because he couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He was totally paralyzed when they looked at him. And he watched them on the ground, picking up bottles. One was always looking at him, while the other was acting curious with sticks and cans and bottles, just passing time, I guess. And then here comes the truck back in. And Junior described as the truck comes down the path and it illuminated all the way down to where they were. They turned invisible and dove in a hole where the old tree stump, the hurricane had blown a big oak tree over, and the bottom of it was still there. It had been cut off and used as firewood, but the root ball was still there and laid overside. So it had a hole where it pulled the dirt up, and they had used it for a trash pit, put cans and bottles or beer cans and drink cans. They didn't, but all the people that had been coming there for years. And he described them. And as soon as the truck parked and the lights went out, they come back visible. And it was when I came down there, they were still there when I got there. I didn't see them, but that's when they left. And when he heard me calling out for them. When we got back to the fire, one of the guys, it went 3 or 4 minutes after we got back talking about this. Everybody's freaked real bad. We were arguing about where I'd been, and I'm arguing myself to death, and everybody's against me, I felt like, and I couldn't fathom 20 minutes is all. One of the guys shouts, look, we all look up, and it looked like Venus on steroids. And there were 8 or 9 of them, stars glowing really bright. They just appeared. And here they go all around the sky, and they'd come together. They went in a circle. They went back out, and then 3 of them comes all the way down and lands in front of us across the river. The river's only 60 yards wide at most. They were up on the bank on the other side. So they were about 75 yards away. They were white, glowing white, pulsating like a welder's light, probably 40, 50 feet around. That's how big they looked. And so you can imagine the pandemonium that set in. The whole, all of us freaked. We left poles, tackle boxes, coolers, everything they owned on the ground beside the river, and in the truck we piled in and took off. And on the way out of there, I don't talk it a whole lot, but one of the guys was shouting because the orb was coming behind us as we left out of there with the truck. There was an orb chasing us, a red orb, and it just vanished. But one of the guys reported that to MUFON many years ago. I've mentioned it. So if you've never heard that, that was part of the thing. But when we got to the top of that hill, I actually had it floored going up that hill to where I felt like I went airborne when I went over the top onto flat ground. And I had to slam on the brakes. We slid to a stop because those same 3 that were there when I went up there at 5 o'clock, it's now 9, at least 9:30. We're sitting there facing the same 3 objects, but the one that took me It's no longer a red ball of flaming fire. It's what looked like a tic tac, or maybe a football laying flatways across the road. And when I described this thing to being 45 to 50 feet, shaped like a football or a tic tac, I didn't use the word tic tac, but I did football, or maybe an egg. It was a little fat in the middle, but it was 50 foot long or close to it. That's what got the government's attention, because they had been chasing this thing around North Carolina coast. The Navy had been seeing it right off the coast of Carolina, and I'm only 60 miles from the coast. And I described exactly what the radars, like David Fravor's radar, reported them 46 foot long, and the exact same description. So they were like, bingo, this guy has been on board one of these. And the pilots are talking about seeing them. I was in one. And that got the attention of the highest in the land. And there's just too many details that nobody knew about that they did. And so we're sitting there doing a standoff. We can't go to the highway because this thing is hovering 5 foot above the road in front of us, 150 yards away. It's already halfway down the road to us. We hear 3 gunshots after I don't know how many minutes we sat there. Everybody in the truck is yelling. I heard everything from get me home. I've got to see my wife before it's over. I want to see my children. It's the end of the world. We're being invaded, because there were orbs everywhere. Now, we had 3 landed behind us, and now we got 3 in front of us and 1 blocking our way. And at the same time, we would see one go by tops of the trees. Just there were 8 or 9 that were up there. And after the 3rd shot, which was all reported to MUFON, this thing turns, instead of being crossways of the road, it turns straight at us. It just pivoted, and here it comes down the road towards us. Now the noise in my truck level, the decibels went to 150 dB. It was that noisy, that much panic in my truck. Everybody just knowing we're about to die. This thing's coming at us. And it starts gaining altitude. And I had an F-150 Ford truck with 4 doors and a sunroof. And I rolled the sunroof back, and it passed right over the top of my truck, totally silent, electrifying. The static from it. I could have shot it with a slingshot and hit it. It was that low when it passed over my truck. It pivoted towards the north and went pew, like it was shot out of a cannon. I mashed the gas, and away we went. And there's a lot of detail in the book that I don't want to get into, but it involves my first wife. That was something that I'd suffered with for 20 plus years. She died in my arms. I'd never had gotten over it because I felt guilty. I felt like it was my fault. And I found her. She had wrecked her car, and I had no clue it was her. I didn't know who it was. I was driving by and saw a car laying on the side of the road. The wheels were still turning and the engine still running. It laying on its side. And when I got out of the car, I ran up to the foot. It was in the front yard of somebody's house. Dead man's curve, and she rolled through the curve up into a person's yard. So I was seeing the bottom side of the car. This is 9 o'clock at night when I was 20 years old, many years ago, 1982. Been married 11 months and 28 days that night. And when I walked up to the house, they stuck their head out. They heard it. I said, did you see who's driving that car? I better call the ambulance. And I started back to the street, and that's where I found her. She was laying in the shade of a pump house, and she was mangled up. It was a traumatic thing. And but the reason I wanted to tell this is because it's important. If you want to figure out what it is we're dealing with, everything that I tell you here is important to my story, and it's all in the book. But when we left in the river in a panic, tearing out of there, we had to go right by that same spot. It was only a mile up the road. It was only a quarter mile past that's where I got shot. I was shot point blank in the back at 10 years old, nearly died. I went through a near death. Um, but there was one of these big giant orbs that was now black. It was almost like there were lights in the middle of it, but the rest of it was black. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was big and it was black and it was hovering right over the spot. And as we drove by, I stopped. I tried to stop. We were running fast as they were pushing me to go 100, and I would only go 60 down that road. And I hit the brakes, jammed on the brakes, and they started wailing at me. You can't stop. I wasn't afraid anymore. Once they brought me back, I had lost all fear. I could not understand why they were so upset. It wasn't computed. My mind was elsewhere. And so anyhow, we slowed down to about 10, 15 miles an hour, and we all look at it as we drive under it. And I dropped them off. And there was a battle, a fight. It's all in the book, who goes home first. And Junior and I, fast forward a while, we end up back at home after we got everybody dropped off. He's panicked. He's running through the house and locking every door, turning every light on, even in the bathroom. No windows in the bath. He turned the light on and locked the door. He had the whole house, all the lights on and all the doors locked, and even the floodlights outside. I'm in my study, which you remember very well, Grant, and listening to the TV, trying to find anybody. I just knew it was all over the news. And it was crickets. I couldn't find anything. Didn't really have TV, so I'm turning into the internet, everything I can find. Junior comes in the room, and my attention goes to him to try to settle him down after what he'd gone through. He was in a bad way, shock. I was worried about him. And about that time, I thought it was a helicopter that flew over, because Fort Bragg's not far, and it was coming from the direction of Bragg, and it was going in the direction of the river where we just come. And I envisioned a Black Hawk or Apache. There's hundreds of them here, just flew right over. But suddenly, my dad, living next door, had always raised dogs. He had 15 hunting dogs then, hounds. He has enclosed kennels with lights and under roof over it and all. He's always raised dogs. From before I was born, he had 100 at the time, always 15 to 30. So that night there were 15 of the loudest hounds you'd ever heard. They all very loud. Hounds, you can hear them a mile away running a deer. You can listen and hear them. They just got a long carrying voice. So imagine 15 of them, 100 yards behind my house in the woods. And every one of them is afraid. They're saying something that didn't sound normal. It sounded like, I'm afraid. Whatever I see there, I don't like, and I'm afraid of it. And so it freaked Junior out again. And I run to the back door and look out the glass door, and there's Rosie, my red Chesapeake Bay. She's sitting there on the steps, hair all bristled up, and she's pointing that way. Looks up at me, and I said, Junior, somebody must be breaking in Dad's shop, because he has a 40-foot garage out by the dog pen. So dogs can see the garage plain as day. And I just envisioned somebody had walked off the road and came in and was breaking in that shop. The dogs was afraid and warning. So I'm like, Junior, somebody's breaking in the shop. We've got to go see. We won't take a flashlight. We can use Rosie. She'll keep whatever's there off of us. Or, we'll hide. They ain't got to see us. I just want to see if we can scare them away or something. So against his protest, he was protesting big time. I convinced him to go with me. I opened the back door, and when I did, Rosie looks up at me, and I said, come on, Junior. And when I stepped out the door, she took off in the direction of the dog lot and stopped about 40 yards out maybe, turned around and looked back at us and to see if we were coming. And we were. We eased our way out. She ran on away from us out into the woods. And you had to go across the grass yard to get to a 2-rut path, a dirt road that went through the woods to the dog kennel. This in the woods. But the front of it faces the garage, right? So they can only see out the front, really. And so when we got there, the closer we got, the louder the dogs got, the more exciting it got. And it was just so loud, and we were looking at them. And, you know, if you've ever been on a bear hunt where you got 6 or 8 hounds running a 600-pound bear, he don't climb a tree. He just walks. And the dogs are biting at him, and he's slapping at him. And he'll cut them open and cut their guts out. I've seen it happen. A big bear can do that real quick. And so the excitement from that, the hearing these dogs, the closer you get, it just, you can't imagine that you experience it. So we get up to that kennel. What blew us away was both Rosie and all the dogs were facing behind the pen in the woods, not toward the garage. And I'm like, what's going on here? I'm whispering to Junior. We're standing 5 feet behind Rosie, and she's pointing like a bird dog in the woods, her hair bristle, barking, woo, 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 like, you know, a dog does when they're afraid of it or scared. And it was loud. I said, Junior, it might be a bear in there, some animal. That's what I thought. Because surely if there was somebody breaking in the garage, the dogs warned them they'd run back to the highway. They wouldn't run toward the dog kennel. It's got to be something walked up in there. Bear. We had bear around. I got bear right here where I live now. He left me a package in my grass back there. Coyotes too. I had one come within 15 feet of me the other night, jumped the fence, and I had to jump up and and it took off. But so I took and I bumped Rosie on the rear. We made a plan to send her in, and then we're going to run back down this path about 50 yards to the grass, make a left and go down to the blueberries back there by the burning tree, and run up against that big oak tree at the back and stop and use that to hide behind as the dog pushed out whatever's in there. So we had to do it quick. You got to cut them off. You got to go quick. So the minute I said, get them, she took off in the woods, every breath barking. Junior and I run fast as we can. We got to the grass. It was already frost on the ground. When I made a left turn, I almost lost my feet because they were slipping on the grass. The frost on it. And I pulled away from Junior. And what I didn't realize was I thought he was still behind me. I just slipped away from him. But he had all he could stand. He didn't want more of that. So he took off to the house. And he ran back up to the house and I didn't know it. He was standing in the back door with the door locked, looking out. So I made that left turn. I ran hard as I could. Now, when I ran up against that oak tree, I'm in a full run trying to hide and cut this because I could hear the dog was almost out of it. And so I stopped myself, and I'm breathing so hard I could hardly. I was a smoker then, so I was really panting. You know how a smoker does. I couldn't catch my breath, and I'm trying to be quiet, and the dog's coming. So I'll turn. I'm holding myself against a tree. All this happened real quick. So I turned to see if Junior was coming up behind me. I just knew he was behind me. And I got the shock of my life. When I looked back behind me, my hands against the tree, I'm like, oh my God. That's what I did. I looked back at the tree and I just, oh my God, I'm dead. That's what I thought. I'm in trouble. So I got as close to that oak tree as I could get, and I rotated my body so I'd have my back against it. I didn't want to get no closer to that thing. I dropped my arms and I said, I surrender. I don't mean you any harm. Rosie's coming still, getting closer and closer. And this childlike being, he didn't look like what people describe as the almond-shaped gray aliens and all that. It didn't look like that. It was more like it looked solid. It was glowing white, a soft glow like the moon, that soft white. It had round, perfectly round, glowing eyes that looked like the marker lights on a transfer truck, those little round ones around the body you see, protruding out about that far. That's what they looked like, digital looking. And it looked like glass. His whole body was like glass, just shiny, shimmering glass. And it had a triangle on its chest right here. There's another point that I made. When I reported that, it got the attention of the highest authorities, that triangle, promise you. And I would end up getting something like that as a gift from NASA. So I'll leave it at that. But it would be a triangle with a circle around it, might say. So, and that's a big hint without giving a whole lot of that away. All this is in the book. But this being spoke to me. All happened so fast. It said, you don't understand. And this very loud thunder in my head. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you. I'd been crying out for help for weeks, praying every day, Lord, help me. I don't want to die, but I don't want to live. I got to raise my children. I can't afford their lunches. This is where I was for months, for weeks. I'd suffered so hard. You know, if you read the book, you won't believe what I've been through. From the time I was 2 years old, I almost burned to death. I caught fire. We burned trash in the backyard, and I walked up on it. And when my grandfather found me, I was in flames. It caught my clothes on fire. Did third-degree burns all up and down my legs. Another minute, it would have probably could have done a whole lot more damage. But that was at 2 years old. By the time I was 6, Jeffrey McDonald, the guy that murdered his wife in February, was sewing up my face right here with 24 stitches. And it never quit. Being shot at 10 years old, point blank to the back. And I can keep right on going. And I broke my back when I was 19 years old, working on a condo 5 floors up. Scaffold collapsed, so threw me down. So, yeah, it hadn't been easy. But that night, I took off. Rosie comes on out of the woods. This thing disappears. It all happened really quick. But she's coming. You know, she's not far in the woods, and she's coming. I surrendered to it, and by the time it spoke to me, within less than a minute, it was gone. It just vanished right in front of me. And Rosie comes out of the woods and runs on out of sight, barking every breath. So instead of running back to the house, I walked to take my time to figure out how I was going to tell Jenner what had just happened and handle that. And of course, I decided not to. And the next day, I realized that I wasn't sick. I had taken medicine for 17 years. And if I missed it, I was in the bathroom for 2 days. It was a penalty. You miss 1 day, you're going to have 2 days of bath. And I would panic every day. Oh my God, I missed my medicine. And this kind of thing would put you in the bathroom, 20 times in a day, 25 at the worst. I was counting. But I never took another pill the rest of my life. It's never, I can eat anything I want to eat. I drink anything I want to drink. I don't have heartburn rarely unless I eat sugar. And I stay away from that and dairy. I don't want either one because it's not good for rheumatoid either. But I can eat it, drink it. But coffee, Grant knows I love coffee. At that time, I couldn't, for 17 years, I couldn't drink coffee. The doctor would tell me it was the oils in the coffee that would aggravate Crohn's. And so that was January the 8th of 2007. And I didn't report it for 10 months because when I told it to my family and the community, these 5 guys, my son and 3 guys, 5 of us, they were telling too. So it didn't take long. The whole community and everybody knew me. I'm building 100 homes a year. I was a popular guy in Fayetteville. I worked 400 people, and I became the laughing stock of the community. The paper was writing crazy articles on me, and the holy water shows up within a couple of days, and they were sprinkling me and trying to hit me and get the Satan out of me, and they were walking my property, sprinkling the leaves, and told me if I ever went to church again, I could never speak about this again. And I'm like, I'm sorry. But what it did is I didn't talk about it for 10 months under fear I'd lose my wife and children. And I finally couldn't take any more pressure. I couldn't think. If I tried to remember anything about it, I would pass out from severe headaches. And it took a doctor to get that to go away. Dr. Michael O'Connell. He was a Harvard psychiatrist that regressed me to get rid of that blockage that they put. When they block you, they can block you. You'll never remember it.
Even your wife was not too happy about things, correct?
No, well, she was living in two worlds, right? Her family brought the Pentecostal holiness movement to North Carolina. They're the conference, their family built it. I mean, wow. So I'm in the middle of the power structure of the church, the most prominent people, and they're a step behind Mennonites, right? You got the Mennonites and the Amish, but the Pentecostal holiness back in them days were so strict. Men didn't wear short sleeve shirts. They didn't wear ties. You don't have a telephone or television. You don't cut your hair. You don't buy on Sunday. So I'm living under that, right? And now I'm dealing with the devil. And so that's what was the worst part of all of it, was how the community turned against me and isolated us. But I would do it all over again for the connection that I have today with this.
Now, let me ask you a question, because it's sort of, I've heard this, and you're telling the story much better every time you tell it. I mean, you got more, you're into it. You're not quiet like you used to tell the story. You tell it with a lot of emphasis. What do you, looking back, and tie this into the burning tree, do you think, because you didn't have a UFO sighting, it was like mine. It was sort of like, yours was like the most bizarre. It was sort of like, let's not just have one UFO. I think I counted when I did them. It was like 13 or 14 UFOs you saw that night. There was a bunch of beings that you saw that night. Do you think that this was a show that they wanted you to tell the world that this was something? Because it was just the most bizarre one thing after another, and then it ties into the burning tree when they sort of, you get the idea that you should go to Warner Brothers, so they want you to do the movie, and then you have another sign. Do you think that in the end that this was all planned beforehand? That this was your, because I mean, I think when you had your message, you have a burden and it is yours to carry, and I asked you what the burden was, and you said, yeah, it's the message. So talk a little bit about that, because to me that's what it appears, that you had this special mission. And they didn't want just one UFO sighting. They wanted a story that would be just wild, that every movie script would grab it, because it was just something that changes people's minds. It was just absolutely a wild, and you're only telling maybe a tenth of the story. I mean, the stuff that happened with you and me there, and all the experiences you've had, it's just the most spectacular story, I think, in ufology.
Yeah, well, what's funny, Grant, is, until I wrote the book, I didn't really tie in all the dates and the time frames, right? And I started looking when you came to my house when Nellie was injured and all that happened. This, hole in her neck that big was shooting blood out. The next minute it disappeared, right under my hand. But do you know, 2 weeks before that was Easter, and that's when the lady came and took me to some desert canyon that until a few years ago I didn't realize where it was. I didn't know if it was off planet. I thought it might be the American Southwest. I wasn't sure, but it was definitely a canyon like I saw one night on a show, came on TV. And when I saw this canyon in Utah, immediately, oh my Lord, I became obsessed with Utah, because I thought that's connected with her, because what I saw in Butler Wash Canyon looked just like where. So for the last 5 years, I've been obsessed with Utah. I wrote about Utah in my book, thinking that's where the lady's from.
Well, let me add one little point to that, because I looked at the dates as well. You had the experience with the lady. A couple weeks before that, February 26th, I had the experience in watching Colin Andrews give the lecture, when suddenly it became apparent to me that this had to do with consciousness, and I completely gave up UFOs and started down this other road. And a week after that, Ray Hernandez had the experience where his dog was healed. So all these events happened within a couple of weeks of each other, and these sort of three major sort of stories that all sort of fit together. So I've done the same as you. When you start looking at the dates, you go, Hey, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. So what it did is that visit with her is when she told me about the alignment in Egypt, about the Sphinx. She said, she told me two things. Well, she told me one thing that I especially remember, and that was the alignment. But what she did was change something about me to where 2 weeks later, Nellie was healed magically. And then from that point forward, I'm whisked to Washington, D.C., to some of the most prominent families up there and watching things happen. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm praying the whole time, Lord, what do I do? I'm being called to help this child or this person or that person. I don't know what to do. Should I put my hands on them? Should I pray for them? Should I hug them? What do I do? I need guidance. So, and I still don't know. What I've learned is it doesn't matter. It's prayer that works. I've learned that I can pray for somebody long distance, and often it has helped those in need. And it boggles my mind when it happens. It don't always help, but it does. So, but that was gifted to me by her, I'm sure.
That's when Nellie, when you had the experience with Nellie, that's when you first started to be able to heal people, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was 2 weeks after the leg. She gave me the alignment, and whatever it was at that point changed physically about me. And without giving it away, if everybody listening will tune in to the History Channel, August the 1st, Beyond Skinwalker, they're featuring me and three of my children on the show. Beautiful. They came here, and I can't tell you what we did. You'll see me wearing a helmet, and if they put on any bit of what we got here, it would do a lot of changing in people. I mean, it's going to be like, oh my God. Yeah. So stay tuned.
But it's not as good as being there. Tell the story. You and I were in Maine. You healed the woman. Tell that story about the woman, the two twins. That's what I say to people. Like, it's one thing to hear Chris Bledsoe's story. It's another one to be in the room when he's doing it. So tell the story about the woman getting healed.
It surprised me too, right? Especially when she stood up and in front of everybody. But I was told by my friend from NASA, which you know who I'm talking about, many years ago, and it's in the book. He said, Chris, if you do anything, I would suggest that you never go to UFO meetings. You never listen to anybody else's story. We'd like to study this with you, and we want it as pure and clean without any outside input. So you figure out your own journey and don't listen to what others say, because people tend to hear something and all of a sudden they're convinced that's what happened to them. That's the same entities when they don't know, really. It's hard to know. So when the meeting started that morning, and rather than, and we all had plans to go across the street for lunch, right? But I slipped out of the room. Rather than hearing the speakers, I'm doing what I was told. And I was on the phone with the guy that morning. He'd called me from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and said, don't go in there. So I went outside, and I'm sitting under the vestibule out front of the hotel on a bench, waiting for y'all to come out for lunch, just passing the whole morning. I listen to you talk because, we're friends. I've heard your story, and Travis Walton, I like to listen to, but everybody else I try to stay away from. So I'm sitting there, and I look over on another bench, cement benches. There's this little lady sitting there. She looks all sad and by herself. So I stood up and I walked over and I sat down beside her, started a conversation. And she said, she looked at me, and I figured out real quick she couldn't hear. She couldn't hear the thing I was saying. I'd have to shout for her to hear. And she said, I'm so sad. I want to hear Travis Walton so bad. I came here to hear him, but I can't hear anything. I cannot hear nothing. I don't even know why I come, but her sister brought her there, and I reckon it was her sister or best friend. She's like, she came and got me and was excited. Travis is here, and I just can't hear. So she was bummed out, sitting out there alone. I sat there with her 30, 45 minutes just talking. Didn't say anything other than just encouraging her. And I got to feeling sorry for her. And about the time y'all started to walk out of the thing to go across to Applebee's, I believe it was, when she stood up, I stood up and I was sitting there thinking, or what am I going to do? I just want to put my hands on her ears. That's what I was thinking. I just got to touch her, but she might think I'm crazy or something, you know how I'm thinking. So when the people started coming out, so it wouldn't feel, odd to her. There was other people watching. I stood up and I put a hand on each side of her ears like that. And I kissed her right on the forehead. And I'd already meditated or prayed on what it was that I wanted. I didn't tell her a thing other than I just prayed for you. And so after lunch, you and I went to lunch and some others, we came back and it was Travis's turn to talk. So she's in the audience and I'm in the back, right at the back door. I wanted to hear Travis. And as soon as Travis got through talking, that lady stands up, throws her arms in the air and starts running through the audience. I can hear, I can hear, I can hear, and ran out the back door just doing this. And yeah, I've seen all kinds of things. You saw that. And
Powerful, yeah.
yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. All I know is there's an intelligence around us that hears everything we say and that we think, and it will interact with you if you ask it to.
And it's powerful. I would like to, a story I heard you tell just a little while ago that I didn't really know is when you were gone for 4 hours, you actually, it appeared to you like you were gone for 4 months. Can you talk a little bit about that? What you were being shown there?
Yeah, and I've been gone more than one time. I've been taken at least 4 times that I know of. Once with Chase Klotsky and her husband.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, 5. It was 8 of us, and we were taken, and they recorded it. They had all their gear on. It was a ghost hunting crew. I'll get into that later. But also was taken with Pam Nance from Spirit Hunters. If you read my book, the very first chapter talks about the Pope saving the Pope, or that really happened. And
the Kletsky one, is that the one you gave me? You showed me the video in Maine where that thing comes across the yard. And you're standing under the tree.
That was a different one.
Oh, that's okay. You got so much.
Jason and I, when we get together, things happen. I mean, it's crazy, but actually, my friend from NASA came down. Our friend, Mark's friend, he knows what I'm talking about, and we all met up with Chase and went out and looked at what, well, let's just say this real quick. I'll get into that story and we'll get back to the time in that orb for 4 hours, right? It was a Saturday night. It was about 2013 or 14. Chase calls me, Chris, you ever heard of St. Paul's, North Carolina? I said, are you kidding? I went to the doctor there. My mom's from there. I was born there. I was born in Lumberton Hospital, just 5 minutes up the road, 10 minutes away. And it's 12 miles from my house. But let me tell you something before you tell me why you asked me about St. Paul's. I just got to tell you this, Chase. I knew where she was going with it. And I said, look, Saturday night, this was Sunday night when she called. Saturday night, I was out back, sitting by my fire pit by myself, laying back. I see 2 orbs appear, just boom, boom, bright white. Well, suddenly they change to orange and they come straight down and they come all the way to the tops of the trees behind my property. And we're sitting there just like this, one bobbing up and down. This one turned white and glowed real white while this one's orange, and then it would stop and go to orange. This one would start going white and go back to orange. And then they shot off straight to St. Paul's, right above the treetops. She said, oh my God. Well, you saw it too. Well, let me tell you what happened. She said, there's a ghost hunting outfit in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is 80 miles from me. It's a Port City, Wilmington. It's called Port City Ghost Hunters. They were in St. Paul's in an old farmhouse, an old plantation house, ghost hunting. And they walked out back across the farmer's field. It was a 200-acre field. And on the backside is an old cabin, which was an old slave quarters way back in the day, I guess. That's what they said it was. And it was dilapidated, and it was 10, 12 feet into the woods. So you couldn't see it if you were riding a tractor until you got right up and looked. It was overgrown, right? So they went in. I called my friend at NASA. I picked him up at the airport that day, and we did the whole survey. He looked at me and said, "What do you think's going on here?" I said, "Well, you see the forest has been decimated. You see the snakes in the field. When we walk across that field, water moccasins were out in the cornfield. The whole place was timbered out, and they timbered the swamp, the cypress trees, and just," I said, "you know, this thing's involved with nature. And I'm sure it's there for that reason. Whatever reason, that's what I believe." And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, "Well, tonight when you go back," because we were going to go back that night and do a ghost hunt, recreate the whole thing with the same ghost hunters. What had happened was there was 2 police officers, a corrections officer, a nurse, and their son. And they were in that old house ghost hunting, and they walked outside, walked out the back door, and 2 orange orbs shot across over their head, streaked right over. That freaked them out. And then a few seconds later, they see something peep around the tree with bright green eyes and look at them. And they pull their guns out and start shooting. Boom, 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 boom. They're firing at them. This is what they told us. And they recreated it. We were going to recreate it, less the guns that night, right? So I took him back to the airport. He went home. Junior didn't want to go there that night. He was a new girlfriend or something. Anyhow, he was with me that day. I get there. We go into the old farmhouse, the big one, start doing their ghost hunting. I didn't like it. I felt weird. The energy was just too off to me. So I said, "I'll meet you outside." I went out and stood until they got done. Then we walked across the field to the house in the woods. We actually drove around the field. Some of us walked. But the cars were parked right along the edge of the woods where that old cabin was. Pete, Chase's husband, is a U.S. Naval subcommander. He navigates under the whole world, under the ocean with a compass, right? There's no better navigator on the planet. Navy, big guy, looks like a Navy SEAL. Chase, a little bitty lady, you know, really tiny, and her husband looks like a giant, and arms like that. So there, those 5 from the ghost hunt crew, at me, Chase, and Pete. We go back in that house and go through it, and they handed me these these detectors, EMFs, and I'm participating. I didn't know what was happening, and nothing went on until we walked outside. Behind that cabin was a ditch. If you take 10 steps behind the back door of that cabin, you couldn't go in the front. It was locked and boarded up, but the back door was wide open. Go down the steps 10 feet, you go in a ditch 6 foot deep. No water in it, trees growing up in the ditch, just overgrown forest. Except one whole side of the property had been timbered. When you walk through that ditch, 10 foot from behind that house, you walk another 100 yards straight away, due west, straight west, out the back door, 100 yards, and you come out on a high tension power line. This is a big clear cut, far as you can see, these big lines of poles. So we only had a 100-yard head of woods behind that building. The ditch is right behind the cabin, 6 foot deep ditch. All of us in tow. My friend from NASA said, "You want to see them tonight? Sing a song. Sing it. Sing a song that's 4 minutes long, so they don't know your thoughts. Don't stop singing it. Don't think about anything but the song." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So I'm in tow behind 7 people. And I'm singing my song. We go across that thing and we get to the power line, and there we stood walking up down the power. Time to go home. We get back to the same spot on the power line and come out. Pete says, "Okay, everybody follow me. We're going to walk straight across to the cabin." So he's in the lead, got his $5 watch on. I'm in the rear. I'm singing my song again. We get just a ways into the forest, I see these guys begin to get freaked out because this phenomena has a way of putting fear into you. If you get near it, it can project fear in your thoughts, and you have no idea which is just why you're afraid. That happened to me on the river the first time.
It happened to me in 76. I was going to ask you about that. Exactly the same thing. Never so scared my whole life, and it ended in a flash. It was just like it was there and it was gone. And it was like, yeah. So when you described that, I know exactly, because you talked about the fact you were never afraid of anything, and there was nothing for me to be afraid of. It just came, and it's very strange, this fear thing when people talk about it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's what was going on. I was totally singing my song and then watching them. And these police officers were like wanting to get their guns already, and they were going that way. And I reached up and I tapped Chase on the shoulder while I'm singing, because I saw one of these beings, green eyes glowing, look around the tree at us. And when I tapped her on the shoulder, I pointed. She went, "My God," she saw it with me. Well, we only walked another few yards and we come up on the ditch. It's only 100 yards across, so it takes 15 to 12 minutes to walk from one side to the other. We timed it going across. I did, so I knew how long it took to cross them woods. When we got to the ditch, when we stepped in the ditch, we only had 10 feet. You could see the cabin. When we stepped in the ditch and come out of the other side, we walked back out on the power. Pete looked at me and said, "Oh my God." He grabbed his head like that and said, "What just happened?" Everybody freaked out. Chase freaked out. I didn't say a word. I just kept singing my song. We turned around and we walked 15 minutes back across, come back out on the ditch, stepped back out to our cars, and everybody called it the night. We're wondering what happened. Chase calls me on Monday and says, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened." I said, "I know what happened." I said, "We lost 15 minutes of time. That's how long it takes to cross that head of woods. You saw the being. I pointed him out. And I know we lost that time." She said, "Oh my God, it was exactly 12 minutes." And all their time clocks, they had helmet cams on. They had all their stuff, this ghost hunting crew, and all their stuff recorded it, the time. So, but I don't remember what happened during that loss of time. But now in 2007, when I was taken for 4 hours, I couldn't think about it at all without having the worst headache for a year until Michael O'Connell did his thing. He came to regress me only for the blockage.
And he was a friend of John Max at Harvard, right? For people who don't know who he was, he's a pretty big major guy. He was not a
John trained him. He worked with John. He was a PhD, Michael O'Connell, PhD from Harvard. He lived in South Carolina, a couple hours away. The Discovery Channel and MUFON hired him to work with me. And he came up and he told me how they would block your brain and he can make it open up. But he said, "Chris, you're not going to remember everything right away, because if I was to allow that or ask you to remember everything right away, it would probably drive you crazy, because your brain has a safe mechanism that will shut down if too much information is coming." He said, "So I programmed you to remember a little bit at the time, but to remember everything." And so immediately I began to think, and no more headaches. And that's when we shot the Discovery show. But I knew right away, the minute he did that, right away, I started having these nightmares. I started seeing all the sights that they showed. I started seeing death and destruction. I saw the end of the world. I saw all kinds of things that frightened me to death. And what it was, it seemed like I was gone for months. They took me from above. I saw everything from an elevated a platform, from an orb. I was in an orb. I could see the walls were clear. And it was like living over Egypt. We were over Egypt. They showed me the pyramids and everything, like Hathor's temple, all that. I saw it the first time. Didn't know why till the lady came. It started all fitting together. And but it seemed like months. I was up over Canada. for sure. I
Wow.
saw things flying in the sky, and I saw what I believed to be something on the ground, mutilating sheep, and somewhere in Canada. I don't know what they were, but they were dark entities. And this was just from a memory that came from being gone for hours.
You've talked a couple of times about the lady. Maybe tell the story about when you first met the lady, how and the importance of who she is.
Well, 5 years later, and what had happened was, after I reported, I didn't report for a year. But the whole community had turned on me, isolated me into depression and into my study. I didn't want to talk. I felt like I would lose my family. I finally made the decision to report it. 1 year and 1 month later, February of 2008, MUFON was at my house. And within 30 days, they had me agreeing to do a documentary. They were going to vindicate the whole world, right? Instead, they made me out to look like a liar. And in front of the whole community, my children began to get ridiculed and criticized and made fun of at school. And they were at the tender age of my daughter 10 and my oldest 17. I had a 15-year-old son, 13, that were into girls. Suddenly, it drove them in a shell. It was hell on earth is what the people did to us, not the UFO. They were trying to help. It was the people, just critical. People are so evil at times, critical. Just got to know everything when they don't know anything, right? But they're just critical. But when you're talking to a 14 or 13 or 15-year-old in school just starting to date girls, you don't do that. And that's what made me angry with these people that set me up and why I wrote about it. And they never expected it to come back, I promise you. They never expected me to be where I am today, right? So hell set in, pardon my language, for 5 years. I was seeing the things, the orbs, shadow people every night, just about every week. It would show up in the house. My family was seeing it, my wife, my children. And they were living in two worlds. They were having to live under the church rules and under family rules and trying to be this way. But when they get home, they were seeing this and experiencing it. So they were torn. So we all became closer and isolated. And I begged the phenomenon. You put it into my brain that I had a mission to do, and that's to tell the world. And I did, and look what's happened. Why did you do this to me? I'm saying this on Saturday night before Easter of 2012. Saturday night. I was done. I see it. It would never let me get a photograph. I could never share it with my family outside of my wife and children. If others came over, it would never appear, but it was always there for me to see for them. And I'm getting bashed, they're getting bashed. So I got mad and I quit. I went outside and I yelled to the sky. I said, I'm done. You came here to help me, but you put hell in my life and my children. Why? Why did you do this? Why? You won't let me take a picture if you just do that. A video or something, share with others so I wouldn't feel so isolated and made fool of. So I went in and went to bed after I did that. I really was serious. I went out that night, Saturday night, 9 o'clock, I went in and went to bed, angry because of my children and what was going on, coming home crying, my little girl, and the teachers picking on them, and students in the hallway, just ruining their lives. And at 3 in the morning, 3 a.m., because when I heard it, I looked straight at the clock. I sat up in the bed. I heard this voice that was as loud as anything I ever heard, especially when I'm asleep. It sounded like a howitzer, loud when it went off in my head. It said, arise, just like that. I sat up in my bed from laying flat, only in my underwear, so quick. And I was alone. My wife was sleeping in the front with Emily in her bed because the boys were having video games. It was Easter and they had friends over. And mom was like, oh, general for that daughter. That those strange boys ain't gonna get near her, right? So she's sleeping in the front of the house, 5 bedrooms, and ours was at the back, and all theirs were in the front. So I sat up in the bed, panicked. I heard that. Who was that? Who's in my room? And suddenly I began to see movement at the foot of my bed. And I felt this, like I wasn't in control at all. But I was made to get up. I did it. I fully dressed myself, a shirt, a coat, shoes, socks, pants, got up, and I walked out the back door following these shadowy figures that went around the curve. I went out the back. I walked to catch up with them. I felt like I was being pulled. You know, I wasn't afraid. It's more like under their control, you might say. They took me right out to the dog kennel, metal fence and all. And when we got right near the fence, one of them stops and turns around, a shadowy figure. They look like ghosts. I have pictures of them. They look like ghosts. Light. Hands me this object that looked like a 5-pound pack of hamburgers size, a tube, like, you know, you get a package of hamburger twisted on the end. It was about that size. It was furry. It had no legs or head or tail. It looked like a creature. It felt like the hair on it felt like a hedgehog. It was prickly. It wasn't hurting me, but it didn't feel comfortable. And I felt it like it was a living creature. So I dropped it. And I heard this voice say, no, pick it up. You must keep. So I leaned over, afraid, but doing what I was told. And when I stood up, they were gone. I'm like, now what? So I'm juggling this thing, afraid. What do I have? I opened the dog kennel and I threw it or set it in and closed the door. I stood up and I thought, well, it's not going to get away. I'm going to keep it. The minute I stood up, this blast of wind, it was so strong that it blew me backwards. This wind did, and I saw the trees disappear in front of me. A big oak, just it's black now, and out of there came a cow, a bull, 1,500 pounds if they make such, 12, 15. It was this tall to his top of his head. It was huge. He's charging me. I have nowhere to go. It happened so fast. I'm off balance. The wind's blowing me backwards, and it ran right over top, and I could see up through it. That was the strangest thing. But I was still afraid. I still wanted to get away. I didn't know where it went. The power from that experience was so powerful. This is important because when she came in sheer power. I got the sense of the strongest force you can imagine, but it was nature. Just like the Egyptians, their gods are animals. They're not ancient aliens. They're crocodiles. They're hawks. They're birds. They're ibis birds. They're jackals. You don't see ancient aliens there. You see forces of nature, right? Hence the owls and the animals that appear to people. It's just the phenomenon. And example, Ezekiel vision of the opening, the cherubims. When it came out of the orb, what did it look like? It had 4 faces: a cow, an eagle, a lion, and a man. Why? It's the natural world. This is how it operates. We're no more important than the kitty cats, right? This is what they made me understand. So she charged me in a powerful way. When I hit the ground, I roared to my stomach, pushed myself up to run, all in a second. I'm getting out of there because I didn't know where this thing went. Is it coming back? And I never got but to my knees. And sitting on my knees on the ground with my butt on my legs, I'm probably 3 feet to my chin. Well, there's a woman glowing this beautiful bluish white glow, and she's 6 feet away. The ground around me is illuminated from her. I'm inside her circle of light. And her dress was white, sparkly. It looked like it was moving. She had a collar on, solid in the front. Her sleeves went out to her wrist and drooped down, and her dress draped over the top of her feet. Her toes, the front of her feet was sticking out, and everything was moving. She was perfectly visible. Didn't look like a translucent image or anything. She looked blue-eyed, bright blue, with this golden blonde, more like golden color hair. She's looking at me. I'm trying to grasp this, oh my God, from a complete fear thing to now, am I looking at an angel? And what am I looking at? Is this God? That's all I could think. She leaned towards me. Every time she speaks, she'd lean over. She said, you know why I'm here. And I knew why she was there, because I was still carrying that anger from just a few hours before. When I went to bed, I was so mad, I was dead serious. I had thought about it for days, weeks, till it come to that point. She said, you got a burden. This is your burden you must bear. You have to do this. You have to tell the world what you know. She didn't tell me what to say. She just said, tell what you know. She said, and if you do this, I will promise you, I will always be with you, and I will help you share our presence to the world, because the time's coming that the world's going to awaken to a new knowledge. The world is going to change, and the people need to awaken, and we're going to help you do that. That's what she told me. Let me tell you, 2 weeks later, magic started happening. Immediately, I was able to start taking pictures, videos, photos. I could have people to my house and it would appear. My mom and dad was really quickly indoctrinated with it. It would appear in the daylight outside. I threw my hands up and it appeared. In fact, it appeared over my dad when he had kidney cancer, and it mysteriously vanished. And the whole family saw this big cylinder right over us. It's metallic, cigar-looking thing. And bro, you've heard that story, right? But magic began to happen. I was with Diana Pasulka 2 weeks later. October comes along. I get a call from Diana, and she's a big-time academic professor in the religious world at UNCW. She went to Berkeley and Stanford. I mean, she's a genius. It's like, she knows, she worked for the Vatican. And here I'm talking about this beautiful lady, and you can imagine I'm right in the right spot. And that began to make us very close friends. And that fall, she calls me and says, I'm working on a movie called The Conjuring. And they're two brothers, the writers. They're as good as they are in the industry. They're A-listed writers, very powerful. They work with Warner Brothers and all these different, they make big movies. They want to meet you. I told them about you. They want to meet you. I said, Diane, I said, it wasn't just a few months ago I gave up on this, and now I'm back at it. It was a video that nearly destroyed me and my whole family that this Discovery Channel did. I said, it'd take a miracle to get me to want to be on TV again. In fact, I'm going to ask for a sign, not a prayer, and pray about it. I'm going to pray to see something physical happen. And if it does, I'll agree to it. She says, okay. Well, they're going back to California, LA, Saturday, I think it was, or Monday. They were flying out. She said, you just got to come see them. This is the last week. The movie's almost over. I've been consulting on the movie, and you got to come see them. So I tell you, I'll pray about it. And I'll ask for a sign. Well, Monday night, this was like Sunday afternoon, Monday night, nothing. Tuesday night, nothing. Wednesday night, nothing. Thursday night, I'm sitting there talking with my wife in my study, watching television. I was a smoker then. This is when I stopped smoking. It was the 13th of October of that year, 2012. I said, Yvonne, I'm gonna go out and smoke. So I paused the television. We were watching something together, and I walked outside and to the back patio. I lit up a cigarette, and it had been raining for 2 days. 2 inches of rain. The grass was wet. Everything was wet. It was like a London fog. It was a hazy, misty, foggy day. And out behind our house, our property was really deep, 600 feet deep, right? Behind the house was 400 feet of it. And I saw way back there beside this old catawba tree, northern catawba, beautiful big giant tree. The orbs had landed next to it in 2007. There's big circles on the ground. 2 of them come over the hedgerow, and wherever they got, they went down over my grass and they burnt streaks, 2 individual streaks out around the trees and a big donut where they sat down. But the third one came over the top of that catawba tree, irradiated the top, and landed 12 feet from the side of it. That's when 40 feet of the tree between 2007 and 2013, 40 foot of the tree had died and fell out. The tree looked dead. I mean, it had no life to it. Half the tree broke off. It was that big where it broke off, right? You saw it. Yeah. It was missing. And it looked like it was dead. And the orbs spots are right next to it, right? But I saw sparks come off of that tree like a bottle rocket. It looked like the little teeny ones you'd buy and put in a Coke bottle when you were young, and shoot at one another. It kind of mimicked those little red sparks. They went out and they went in different directions. Well, my wife was smoking then, and she came to the back door and saw it do it again before she ever opened the door, because we had a full glass back door. I'm standing on the concrete. She sees it spark. Shut the door and said, "What in the heck's going on with that tree?" I said, "I don't know, but I see it." And immediately it just went poof in a big ball of fire and was burning up through the top of that tree, coming out the top like a smokestack. And boy, that set the whole, my mother and dad, my wife called everybody, "Oh my God, you won't believe this." And so Ryan goes out with his iPad and he's filming it. This tree just spontaneously, but it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube, yeah. I remember to add something to this. I remember when I talked to your father, he was kind of skeptical of the whole thing as well. I remember him saying to me, he says, "You know, Grant, the night I saw that tree burning, then I knew my son was telling the truth."
Yeah, it changed everything. See, and the lady did all this. The lady did. It all happened right after she came at Easter. Now it's only October, right? And so I got on the phone right then. I said, "Diana, I got your sign. I'll see you tomorrow." And so Yvonne and I got up at 8 o'clock, got in the car and drove an hour and a half to Wilmington and walked in and met these 2 handsome twin brothers. They're identical twins or close. Yeah. They look just alike. And I'll never forget, they were sitting at this table with big tall stools, elevated table, a little round. It was just us. Jeremy was with me. It was 5, 6 of us, 3 of me and them.
And the story was that Mel Gibson actually wanted to play you, correct? Was that true? Yeah. Is that a true story?
Yeah, that was mentioned. Mel and others, quite a few others. And long story short, Chad looks at me and says, "Well, what kind of sign did you get?" I pulled out my cell phone and said, "Look at this." And when they saw that tree catch fire, they're like, "Oh my God, something really, this is amazing." And they all got the feeling that they need to be a part of telling this, right? And the magic never stopped. It's still going. It's still happening. It's happening 100 times greater today than it ever was. I mean, I can walk out right now with this cell phone. If I had a camera hooked where y'all could see it, I would guarantee you we'd see something come by. It's that crazy. I had an orb last night come right down out of the sky, come within 10 feet of me and a friend that I just met through this. He lives in Charlotte and he works for Pepsi. His name is Ramon. If you look at my latest Instagram posts, you'll hear me say Ramon, and you can hear him talking like, "Oh my God, But he got to see it up close last night, really close.
Incredible stories. I'm sure there's a lot of people with questions that want to ask you, get a chance. I just want you to do one more, because you and I and Mark all know our friend from NASA who was very interested in you, the one that said to you, they seem to be wanting to talk. They don't want to talk to us, but they're talking to you. So we're trying to figure out what they're telling you. He tells this story. Ryan told the story on his podcast, and you've told the story. Tell this story about the medal, which absolutely indicates that at least this one guy knows something that is more significant than just lights in the sky. Tell the story about the medal, where he takes the two pieces of metal.
Okay. If you really want to know a lot, there's a lot more in the book about this, and I have a lot of photos of it. And I've been front and center in the metal in business. They call it artifact. I've been tangled in with that for 13 years now, close to it, 12 years, and 10 years. 10 years is when Tim came. What he did. And that's not the only medal. I've had other pieces that I don't no longer have. The U.S. government has it and made it classified, won't give it back. And
this is the one with the two pieces of metal. This is what I'm talking about, where he puts the metal in your hand.
No, this was some more that I had that was dripping.
You had the one with the dripping. You told me about that. You had a lot of metal stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think the medal is about? Do you think that's another display of a story that they want you to tell that?
Well, let me say what I've been told and what I believe. Our friend that we know is one of the highest ranking guys at NASA, period. He's the Dragon. That's even his console number or handle. He's the eyes on the sky. He's National Reconnaissance Office, if you want to know what that is. They own the satellites. This is the top guy that gets to see everything the satellites see. When it picks something up, people don't get to see it. There's only one or two ever that get to see this.
Yeah. Then he even has the photo of you in the conference room where there's only been 250 people or whatever, the astronaut conference room. You and him sitting in. You got the photo of you and him sitting in that room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember you telling me that he had the key. That when he would drive around, the gates would open and people knew who he was, and people would just scramble when he was moving around the base.
Absolutely. In fact, you know what he told us? He said, absolutely don't speed on this base, because he had to work while he invited me to the base, and I got to tour it. I was there for a week almost, and he had to go into work at days. But he called a friend from a National Reconnaissance Office buddy from Houston to come and stay with me all week, and I got to meet some really cool people, a bunch of scientists. They come from California to meet. But he would tell us, do not speed. If you go over 35, you will get pulled and they will find you. They'll kick you off the base. Do not go over the speed limit, whatever you do. So Pete's driving, right? He's the NRO guy and he's butting along. We go up to mission control. We pick him up and there's machine guns out there, right? You don't go through that gate. He walks out in a suit and a tie and his glasses like Hollywood, and these guys with the machine guns yes sir, when he walks through. He gets in the car, he's driving. Next thing I know, he goes tearing down through the base everywhere at 50, 80, 70, 80 miles an hour. We get out on the airstrip, the longest strip in the world. It's 3 miles long from one end to the other, and we were racing up and down it at 107 miles an hour, right? This guy owns the place. So when he comes to my house, we met him with y'all, right? You and Mark.
Yeah.
He actually heard I was there and flew in from LA, from California, and stopped by on the way home to Florida.
That was actually quite an honor. I didn't know who he was at the time, but now to think back, because everybody sort of talks about, whispers about him, and I think, wow, I actually met this guy. It was only for a couple of minutes, but to actually be in the because he didn't put on any airs of being important. I didn't know who he was. He was just showing me photographs of different things, and actually introduced me to an experiencer who lived here in Canada, who's now living in Florida. He was, and I didn't know who he was. Now I realize he's this super powerful guy, and I thought, wow, actually.
Yeah, he's the man. He's the guy, right? At NASA. They all bow to him, and I got to tour places. In fact, we went into the astronaut crew quarter, and he walked with me up to the door with he had scientists with him, and one of them's wife, and the den mother had been taking care of that place for 30 some years. Nobody went in there. She lived there. She let the astronauts in. She lived with them with the doctor. You know, when they go to the moon, they were in quarantine for a month or 6 weeks before they got in the spaceship. There had to be no sickness. And this is their crew quarter where they lived, where only the doctor lived and the astronauts and their children. And the den mother said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm his friend." She said, "Who is he?" Why is the Tim just smiled? And then he's like, let's open the door. She said, "I have to tell you, only 300 people has ever been in this building since its inception in the 50s. No, when they went to the moon, they built it in the 60s. They'd walk out them double doors and get in an Airstream camper, right? They'd tug it out to the launch ramp and they'd go up the elevator. I got to go through those doors. I got my pictures taken walking through the doors. And she's like, "How did you get in here? There's only one U.S. president ever been in this place. No congressman, no senators, 300 people in all these years." And I said, "I'm just his friend." So he told me, "Once you leave this place, you'll never be the same. Because everybody that went up there, something came back."
Wow.
Yeah, and it's still there. They see it all the time around there. They don't have nothing to do with them. And he told me that. I asked him, I said, "Why do you need me? Y'all have all the rockets, all the satellites, all the cameras, the space stations, trained people, all the money in the world. Why are you messing with some country boy in North Carolina?" He said, "Well, we know it likes you. We see it. It has nothing to do with us. It's very elusive, but it likes you, and we'd like to know why." And that's how it all began. And so for the next 16 years until I wrote this book, you didn't hear much of me. I wasn't out talking because I was busy dealing with government folks that I become very good friends with. And to this very day, I'm very partial to a lot of those guys, very good friends of mine. And they made the most sense to my wife and my children and my dad. It was NASA that walked next door to my house and told my dad, flashed their badge out at NASA and said, "Look, you got to believe your son. He's telling you the truth. That's why I'm here." And it was these people that did that. It surely wasn't the UFO world or the MUFON or the community or the church. They put pressure. It was my friends within the government that made helped his family. They helped Chris Jr. They knew he was struggling. And that is very dear to me. Jim Semivan and I were very close friends. I was in Delaware at his house over Memorial Day. Spend a couple of days there, Yvonne and I, and little Brandon from the book. He was given a Make-A-Wish at 12 years old. He was written off. He was going to die. He had 1 year to live. And we got to spend a couple of days together in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, down the street from Joe Biden's house. While orbs were flying over Joe's house, over Jim's house, we were filming them. And Jim's like, "Oh my God, what is that?" I said, "That's what you want to see right there." It was flashing at us. We got a bunch of video. And it's become quite popular in the ranks right now, the videos we took at his house.
And for people that don't know, Jim Semivan actually had beings in his room. He was a very high level, equivalent to a 2-star general in the CIA. And he knew about you, but he couldn't talk to you until he retired. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you know, he's still there. You don't ever leave, but he had to overtly retire.
Yeah.
But he still gets paid. He still does his job. But he don't have to pull the hours. You know, if he worked 4 hours a month, he still gets his. He has to be there. When you get that high up and you have that much knowledge, you're not going anywhere. Those guys are lifers. I mean, he's like a 2-star general. They don't ever leave. And we thank the world of him and his family. And he got to experience the phenomenon with me and with little Brandon, which now is 6'2" with arms this big.
Wow.
And he'll be a junior in college when he starts at this fall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, my last question, and then we'll turn it over to people who want to ask you a question, is Jim has when he gets asked, he said, not only it does not appear to be any there, and I don't even know if we could connect the dots. I don't know if there's even any dots. And I think you and I both have the impression that it's starting to move into the UFO community, that this is not the ET thing people think it is. So explain what you think is actually going on, because I think people still have the idea that it's just some aliens that got lost here and whatever. And I think the story you're telling and that Jim sort of promotes and I promote is that this is much bigger story than just a bunch of ETs who are flying around here.
Yeah. Well, for everybody listening, if you read my book, you'll read in the front where Jim says that Chris is the most studied person in history by the government or the academic world. They've been studying me for a long time. So they know it's real. They've seen it with me. 2-star generals have seen it with Jim. That's what he's equivalent to. The CIA, John Alexander, Bob McGuire, and a whole lot more government people, academics, tenured professors. They've witnessed it. Their lives have changed. I've never seen an alien. I've seen discs glowing in the sky fly by. I've got them in the daytime on video. Chris Jr. is the best at it. He can take them every day of the week, videos in the daytime. For some reason, he's in tune to it and it'll appear and he sees it. If he can get it in that cell phone. If he had a bigger camera, he'd have some very credible footage. But those same discs in my opinion, are the orbs. They mimic everything. They can be a black spear in the sky. They can be a metallic ball. You see these balls. You see old paintings with a ball with antennas on it. Everybody thinks, oh my God, it's a Sputnik. Well, these orbs, they mimic a flying saucer. They can mimic it. They can make you see what they want you to see. But it's always been a spiritual thing. I've gone long-winded here to tell the story of where I was in my life, suffering, ready to die, ready to give up. And they came when I was desperate. I can tell you that I'm written by thousands of people. It's all I can do. And I answer every single person that writes me. And sometimes it's all day, answering hundreds and hundreds every day, thanking them for buying my book. And it's the reality is that I was praying, and it came. All these people that write me or call me, I'll ask them every time, why is it? When did you start having these experiences? They all want to tell their experience. A lot of them do. And if I start asking questions, I'll always find the root cause. When it started, their mama died, their daddy died, their grandparents died, their husband died, their children died, they lost their house, they're in a divorce. It's always suffering. That's when they come. I have more ladies that are widows that reach out that their husband died and suddenly pennies are appearing, or lights go by their window at night, or orb goes down the hall and they're freaked out. And I'm like, it's probably your husband. He's there to speak to you. Don't be afraid. Why would you be afraid? Don't be afraid. Embrace it. Know that it's probably your husband coming back to speak to you, leaving you a gift, telling you he's there, trying to comfort. And it seems that that message resonates deeply with a lot of people. And so it's conscience-based. The government knows this. They don't know how to tell it. I'm doing it. I'm telling them because they don't know how. They don't know what it is. It's so elusive. It can appear in any way it wants. It can shut off nuclear weapons. It's not aliens doing that. It's these orbs doing it. They can do it. They can turn it off, turn it on. They just let us know you don't need to be playing with them toys. They're just too powerful. And I'm not saying they're not aliens. They very well may be, but that's not my experience. It's always light. It always comes in prayer. That's how it comes. When I go out, I pray, Lord, let me see your presence. And I'm praying to God, not to some entity. And here it comes. They come like excited to see me. And they respond in that manner. If you went out there and you tried to summon them or do some protocol thinking you're going to get this experience, you might get a flash, but they're not dogs. You can't call them like a dog. If you understand who they are and you respect that and you connect with it on that level, then they will start interacting with you. And I know this to be fact because I've been able, how, I don't know, but I have, let's just say, I don't like to use the word I because I sound self-centered or bragging, but let's just say this Thursday, I have a meeting, Zoom meeting on with a group in Spain. And it started with a lady over there that had lost her husband. And a tenured professor friend of mine in Charlotte, North Carolina, was over there with her, called me. And he'd seen the orbs with me a lot. And even within 5 feet away, appearing 15 of them around us at one time. He's like, oh my God, changed his whole life. So he's in Spain, and this friend of his is suffering bad, crying, calls me, can you help us? I said, yeah, walk out on your back deck, on her back deck, look towards the north, look at the Big Dipper. And I said, just give it 1 minute. And while I was talking to them, immediately orbs appeared, flash, 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 and they changed her whole life. Now, she went out 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago with a group of 20 people, doctors, highfalutin people in Spain, Granada, Spain. They hiked in up on a mountain in a desolate place, and they called me. It's 3 o'clock in the daytime here. It's 8 or 9 at night up there. I lay down on my bed. My grandson's next to me watching cartoons, and I just envision Spain, which is southeast of me, across the Atlantic. And I imagine seeing that and a point in space. I made that triangle, and ask it, if it be your will, show your presence to all these people. And for the next hour, they were floored. They had dozens of orbs appearing and flashing at them. So it's in the book, where I've been doing this since 2016, having it appear with a guy with a camera sitting on a power line in Houston, Texas, or a guy sitting in Charlotte, or a guy sitting in Washington, D.C., and it appearing right up over Washington. And they're like, oh my God, how does he do that? And all I know is I ask it to, and it does. And so communication is ongoing. There's already been contact. And we're studying that. We're studying the light, the pulses in the light. Are they trying to send us a special communication through Morse code, or is it in the pulses? So I've got scientists listening to me all the way to Washington. I sent a video up this week, a long video of this thing flashing codes at me. And so there's a lot of exciting things going on. But the government doesn't know how to tell it because it's just too complex.
You are the messenger, and it's been an honor to have been associated with you and to had some experiences with you. I mean, it's a pleasure. So let's turn it to, if you got a time for a couple of questions. I'm sure there's people who have seen your story and are dying to ask you a question. So Mark, you want to move the meeting to the next section here?
Well, we've been 2 hours so far, Grant, but which is fine. As long as you're okay with this, Chris, we're happy to sort of make things happen.
Yeah, well, let's answer a few questions.
Okay. Under for everyone in the
hang on 2 seconds. We have several questions in the chat that people gave us much earlier than
Go ahead, Betty.
okay. Just to be fair to them, they put in this here, okay. To be honest. Okay, first one says here from Joan Dillon, she says, Tim Taylor recommended that while going through the security at NASA, you focus on a song to prevent your mind from being read. Can you tell us anything more as to what this is about?
Well, I put that in the book because it happened and I knew that it would get some attention. But what do you think that means? I mean, I'm trying to figure that out. He didn't explain it in detail. He just told me, you see that little black box there? There was a little booth. In other words, if you can imagine these big gates with barbed wire and Air Force guys with machine guns standing there like this across that gate and mission control on the other side. Well, on this side of the gate is a little black, probably 8x8 hut that was totally black and the glass was black. There wasn't no seeing into it. And he's like, Chris, when you walk by that gate, he said, they can read your thoughts. Who are they? Have we created technology that can read your thoughts? Did they have something in there from some other world that is working with them to read your thoughts? I don't know that answer, but I suspect they have the technology to do it. But regardless, I listened to what he said and I was singing away. And I made it to that gate, went in, I got to meet the general that ran the whole place. It was a lady. She allowed me to come. You can't even go down there. Can't get into the base.
Sounds great. Next question is from Mark. Describe the experience of meeting the shimmering being in the canyon. And how long did you talk to her? And what did you talk about?
Betty, he's already described that, but the only thing I'd like to add to that, and maybe Chris, you can add whatever you like. How did you get to the canyon? This canyon where the shimmering woman, the shimmering being was. How did you get there?
In an orb. It's in the book in detail, and it was Easter of 2013 when I'm laying in bed and I look up and I could see through the top of the house. There's a big ball of light shining through the roof of my house. Just brilliant. It was an orb. And the next thing I see is the rafters. As I'm going up through the rafters, I'm looking at the stuff I have in storage up there. And right on up through the top, I went into this ball of light and I'm inside of an orb and it's clear. I can see out of it perfectly. The beings are always behind me or just barely visible, but they're big and tall. They look tall. And we sat down. We went somewhere far away. I didn't know if we were off planet or what, but I've since realized that I think it's Utah. I even wrote about Utah in my book being where she took me, or they took me to meet her. And that's when I was told about the alignment. And but let me move to something else I'm going to say today, first time around anyone other than two people. You know that the children of Fatima was able to share the lady's presence. The Catholics call her Mary. You know, I don't know Mary, but it could have been whoever she is. We believe it's the same lady as Fatima, right? She told these children to keep telling it. Under severe persecution, they were persecuted, thrown in jail. They lived their life out in a prison, basically, locked away, never to speak. Two of them died very young. So it wasn't the best of circumstances for them, but the lady said, if you will go tell everybody, October 13th, we'll be out here. We'll appear in front of all your people. So I believe that I'm being drawn to Utah, to the desert canyons. I'm actively looking for a camper or some way now to go out there and stay for weeks at a time. And I think the lady's calling me to share her presence with the Lord. And I'm just now saying this. I've told some friends in Hollywood. I've told 2 others. So that's where I'm headed. I think she's just may let me get her on camera to share, to help awaken this planet. I'm not sure about that, but I'm feeling that. And when I have these feelings, and it usually comes true.
Okay, our next question here is, thank you. It comes from Jess. She says, thank you for sharing. What about the triangular symbol on the chest of the being? Is that an Illuminati type symbol?
No, the triangle is the oldest symbol known. It's the same as the pyramid. It's a 3-sided figure. And when I ask our friends at NASA and other folks to know what does that mean, they were all really interested in that. I was actually given something from NASA that represented that triangle, 24 karat gold that I wear on my collar. And only people get that. NASA, the people there know what it means, and there are very few of those. But let's just say
that's in the book, right? That photo of that.
Yeah.
So if they get the book, you can see the symbol and that you got. Yeah.
But it's a triangle, right? You look at NASA stuff. They got triangles, and they got owls, and they got ladies. They got a woman. They always had the woman. They had the owls, and they had the triangles. And so I asked what it means. The beings told me. I said, who are you? They said, we're the guardians. We guard this world. This planet is like a terrarium. We monitor all life. We take care of it all. I explained that to them very early on. And they told me that they believed that it meant the never-ending, the universal creation of life. That that thing that came here comes from a long ways away. And does it mean there's life throughout the whole universe? It's a universal symbol of life, creation of life.
Okay, next question here is from Carol. Do you think that this is the same apparition as the miracle of the sun? In other words, what the children seen is actually a UFO and the same being?
Well, they didn't describe a UFO. They described the setting sun.
Right.
The city, it came a rainstorm, right? There were 80,000 people out there looking on, and the rain started, got everybody wet. And all of a sudden, here comes the setting sun that descended down, and the heat from it dried our clothes out. And what else was happening? Orbs were flying everywhere. The Lord's all over the place. So,
okay. The next question is, will you be participating in the next public NASA briefing?
No, I doubt that.
Okay.
I doubt
and
that.
We have from Ron Thomas. He's feeling very grateful for you, and it's an enormous experience, and he's going to be reading your book. I, in fact, just downloaded your book into Audible as one of my numbers that I have to have. I buy ahead of time and stuff. And then Professor J. Paul is also asking, did you see the crop circle from the 2012 October 13, 14? I'm not sure what crop circle that is.
Yeah, I don't know which one it would have been.
Grant, do you remember that one?
Chris, you had the one crop circle that you showed me the painting you'd done of the Guardian, and it appears in the crop circle, correct?
Yeah,
it was a double angel, the one in October 2012, 13 and 14. It was a double angel. It's on Crop Circle Connector Archives, but it strikes me that it happened, you know, this was a double angel on Windmill Hill near Avebury. So just take a look at it, and it may, because it connects 7, but look at that crop circle. It was the last crop circle in 2012.
Okay,
so 2012. Just 2012, October 13, 14 at Windmill Hill near the Great Stone Circle of Avebury. Beautiful formation in in grass. So
There
yeah,
is
thank
one
you.
the one
Yeah.
that Chris and I are talking about is the one where you take a look at Chris's painting that he showed me, and you'd never shown it to anybody. You remember your wife told you nobody's going to see these paintings. You
Yeah.
brought them out when I was there in 2013. It's
Yeah.
identical in the crop circle. Even the shadow under the eye, it's identical to the painting that you'd shown me in 2013, and it appeared
Right.
in a crop circle in England. That was like just, I was floored. I said, that thing looks familiar. When you showed me the photo or the painting, I was like, I've seen that before. And it was in the crop circle. It was weird.
Yeah, it's a big painting about that tall. I think it's 4 foot tall at least.
And that's the one that had the message: beware of false promises. It has
Yeah.
the binary message. The alien is, or the
Yeah.
being is holding this circle of, as a binary message that somebody decoded.
Right.
Okay.
Grant, Betty, can I just add something right now for people that may want to buy the book? So in the chat, there is one note there that I'm not sure who put it in there. My eyes are not that great right now, but you can copy and paste that into a Word document. So you can there's a link where you can buy Chris's book. And there's also, the name of the book is there and that sort of thing as well. So if you go to that, copy that right now and paste it if you're going to look to buy the book. And I advise that you do. And this is only just a small taste of Chris Bledsoe and the amazing story that will continue, I'm sure, for a very long time. But sorry about that. Go ahead.
We have several thank yous for sharing your time with us, and also for Grant sharing the time with us. It's wonderful to have you both here. We can now do some live questions if you still have some time.
Sure, let's shoot.
Okay, if people would please put their hand up first, and then we'll call you forward if you want.
You go into reactions, Betty, and you actually put your hand up. It's you touch the button and it says raise your hand. If you do that, it'll pop up here, and we can bring you forward and ask a question of Chris if that's it. Just like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, we have one. Go ahead.
Hi, Chris. This is Hanuman. I'm from just outside of Washington, D.C. I'm an experiencer myself, and I just wanted to compare notes with you, Chris. Do you find I've just noticed they have the ability to project their consciousness. I don't know what their range is, but there's been times that I have a few pictures of a few UAPs I've taken back in February. I'd like to share, or I don't know how the best way to get them to you. But do you find that I just noticed that they have this ability to really extend their consciousness to make you aware of something. Yeah. I don't know if you've had that experience. And my second question, from my experience back from the 80s, I've noticed their crafts. The word craft is not the right word to use. It's almost, when I was on board on one, it felt like it had a consciousness of its own, if that makes any sense. Did you have similar experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me say this. I didn't ever talk about the metal. I kind of avoided that a little bit, but it's in the book. And I can tell you that I have researched something called quasi-crystal. Researched that, and where they found one. It was at the Trinity site where there was an atomic blast, right? They've only found one of these things, but it has some remarkable properties. And this metal, when my friend came to first time to my house from NASA, he had a backpack. He got my whole family. There's 6 of us, and plus Ryan's little girlfriend did. She's his wife now, Jenny. She was there. He concocted an experiment where he took my son Ryan to his bedroom and showed him this metal. Not telling anybody. Ryan was the point person. He couldn't tell anybody what he saw. So after he was tested, he came and he got each brother, one at a time, take them in the room. They got tested. They stayed in the room. Ryan went back out. He got the next person. So I was the last one. And they're all sitting in this tiny bedroom. My friend from NASA and 6 other people. And I squeeze in there and sit on the bed. I look up and there's a computer. And it said for Bledsoe only. federal government warning, if you go past this point, you could be killed. All this was a briefing, right? So I was briefed. Our family was. And after I watched this video, he reaches in his backpack and pulls out a piece of metal, and it looked like a postage stamp size, looked like a shiver of aluminum, real thin, real light, could hardly feel the weight to it. It was the side of the postage. Put it in my left hand. What do you think of that? I said, it looks like a piece of aluminum. I don't know what that is. I don't have any thoughts about it. So he reaches in his pack and pulls out a piece of aluminum foil. That's what it looked like. And it wasn't creased. You couldn't crease it. You could roll it up and it didn't pop straight, but it wasn't creased. You couldn't crease it. He put that in my right hand. And when he did, this piece connected through my body to this piece. Come to find out, this was the insulation. This was the outer hole. And they were talking to one another. And when they did, it caused my eyes to go back. And the energy shot through me. My arm was thumping. And he reached in my hand and got it out. And I saw his face that close to mine. He looked at me and said, "Why you?" I said, "Excuse me, what just happened?" He said, "Why you?" I said, "What do you mean, why me?" He said, "Well, I can tell you, I've never seen this kind of reaction. And I've only ever seen 2 reactions in my life, but never like this." He said, "I would have known you were lying about this whole thing, if about seeing the beings and all, if you hadn't had the reaction." And from that point on, I began to get tangled up into stem cell research, working, not knowing what I'm doing, but at least I got a chance to participate in it. And I worked on the first stem cell transplant in history, and the lady was healed in 60 days from bone cancer. They do some tremendous good that NASA does with medical stuff, with this technology. Looking at it under the electron microscope, it's alive. You can look at it in real time and it's swirling. It looks like the universe and the stars, the Milky Way, winding around inside. And I ended up with some of that, and the government ended up with it and classified it. And I've been told if I had another piece, it's worth $1 billion, that small. And boy, I wish I had the pieces I had back. So
Chris, he mentioned consciousness. Quickly, take 2 minutes to tell the story that you told me for my book on flying the craft.
Me?
Yeah, when you flew the craft with the consciousness.
It's always in an orb. It feels like an orb, not a metallic craft. And I'm always, every time they take me, which seems to be quite a bit, I think they can take your spirit and leave you here. This is possible. But every time I'm in that position, inside of that orb, I feel like I'm a part of it. That any direction I look, I can go just by thinking about it. It's not like I'm connected or they're doing it. I feel like I'm connected to the orb itself. And I don't understand what it means, but I have found myself in one position. One time I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, like an Indian, going down over the Cape Fear River.
Where you got
just
taken.
Feeling like I'm flying like Superman, but I'm inside of one of these orbs. And so it's definitely connected to our conscience. Everything is. Every living thing and every piece of your body is communicating with something outside of us. And it's coming through the green light. We know this. NASA knows this, that the green light is the center of the color spectrum. It's the angle of the sun, the way it shines on the earth, it casts green light. And it's the green trees, the green grass, the green flowers, everything's green. The chlorophyll in a plant is called ADT. It's the same thing as the hemoglobin in a human. It's the light. When it shines on chlorophyll, tells it to come alive and how to grow and be prosperous. Same with the human. The light shining on the hemoglobin is what encodes this whole body. you're not telling that tiny micro machine. There are trillions of little tiny robots inside your body. They know this now. Look at microbiology. Your whole body is created with thousands and trillions of machines. They line up in lines and they work together and they carry loads. They look like little people walking. You're not telling themselves what to do. They're doing it on their own because something else is telling it. And that's just consciousness. That's God, I guess. That's the green light. And NASA says they know where God is speaking to us, and that's through the green light.
What's the best way to reach you? I have some pictures and a formula that I kind of got downloaded, and I wanted to maybe compare notes. I don't know which is the best way to reach you.
You can catch me through my website, ufoofgod.com, under the contact tab, or another good way is to, if you go there, ufoofgod.com, you can find my Instagram link and my Facebook link. And on Instagram, I have a lot of videos there. I've only probably got 40 or 50, but and I'm steady putting one or two up here and there. But you can message me instant and I will answer you, and we can share videos and stuff if you'd like.
Thank you, Chris. You helped me validate my experience. I'm getting chills because that was my same experience. It was like the interfacing in the past, present, and future just occurred instantaneously. It was just a matter of which direction you want to go.
Yeah. And I appreciate you telling me that. And I'm glad I got to meet you and hope we conversate a whole lot more. It'd be,
yeah, I'm getting chills. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
That green light is pretty significant. I've never heard that before. Is that in the book? The green light stuff? I'm
not sure if I think I wrote about that. If I didn't, I'm telling you.
That's pretty significant. That especially coming from Tim. I mean, that is very significant.
NASA published the article. I have the paperwork.
Wow!
Actually, I was brought into the 156 megahertz thing, which we're now understanding how these little machines operate. Well, what we do know, and I was brought in on this 10 years ago, that they know for sure through science that they can detect a signal coming from our bodies, transmitting on a radar frequency in the 156 megahertz range, which is a radar frequency, meaning it goes out and it hits something and it comes back. So each and every one of us humans, including the plants and the animals, are pinging a signal out into space and it's coming back. So our DNA is talking to the green light, to God.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's the most significant thing I've ever heard you say. That's just amazing.
Yeah, I've been
Write
around
some more about that.
Yeah, I've been in
Chris,
on those studies.
Can I just, so when I was with Tim in New Mexico, we were on a UFO dig and with Wade, Chuck Wade is the guy's name that invited us. And we sat at nighttime talking with Tim. And he told me that NASA emulates our DNA because it's the best antenna. So our connection to his subconscious could be through our antennas, which is our DNA.
Yeah.
And if NASA is emulating it, we're emulating it with our own bodies. That's how we receive messages and why our thoughts are so powerful. We're transmitting and receiving at the same time.
Yeah, we live in a wireless network. And here's the cool thing. Our skeletal system, now the paper, I've gotten the paper. It's a published article that at one time it was confidential. I guess it still is. But they know for sure that the hair is the receptor. When you feel your hair standing up, something's talking to you. Women have always been the most spiritual creatures on earth. It was the early church that knew that, and they took the woman out of the church. They oppressed them, make them wear things over their face, and really all the oracles were women. Why? Because they have a more sensitivity to their hair. They know for sure in World War II, there were wind talkers, right? The wind talkers, Navajo Indians. They could talk, and they had my hair standing up. They had special abilities, these Native Americans, and the government used them in World War II. The minute they cut their hair, they lost all their power. They've known this since the 40s. It's nothing new. And your hair is your receptor, and your skeletal system is the antenna, and your DNA is the transmitter. So it's going through your body, out of your, and in your hair. And so all you women out there, that long hair is beautiful, and it actually gets you connected closer to consciousness, to the spirit world.
Mark, didn't Tim tell you the same thing?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he did. So they know some stuff that, thank you, Chris, for giving me some insight. I mean, this is encouraging that there are some people who know some stuff, and it's not, hopefully it's not going to be used for weapons.
Oh, you don't got to worry about that. I don't think they're going to do that. They're struggling trying to figure out what it is, just like you and I. In fact, they're listening to us right now. And I can tell you, they listen to everything I say. They monitor me, and half the other governments around are watching. They know let's just say I've been warned, they're all watching, and I know they are. But it's okay. I'm not afraid. I feel totally safe.
Yeah, well, it would make sense. I mean, there's the one expression that I heard from a high-level guy was, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch those who the phenomena influences. Why would they not watch people who, I mean, they're trying to figure it out as well.
Yeah. And I don't think they're going to ever tell people what they want to know. They want zero gravity. They want a flying saucer. They want an alien in a body. And if you don't have that, you're not going to convince them. And the government, I don't believe they have all that. Maybe they do, but I've never seen it, and I've never heard of it other than the same places we've all heard, like Bob Lazar, or, different ones. But I wouldn't doubt it. I think they do have some sort of wreckage. And it's like Tim told me. He said, Chris, they can come from 50 million light years in 2 hours and never warp. That's how fast they can go. Think about that. Do you think they'll crash? I said, no, sir. He said, they don't crash. They do not crash. Whatever we got was given to us as a gift to help us evolve. And they're using it more for medical technology. Without spilling the beans, I'm telling you, they've done a lot of good work helping people with health issues, with hip implants and spinal implants, stem cell stuff, all derived from this exotic material. They don't know how to make it fly, but they can use it for our good. And I think that's why it was given to us.
Tim's got 40 patents, and they're all medical patents. And he clearly stated to Dan Pasolka how he gets them, his meditation process, and how they talk to him. And people don't realize this kind of stuff is going on, that there's this connection, that you're connected to him, and there's this behind the scenes stuff that people are starting to understand. And it's not the alien thing. It's something much more magnificent and godly, I think.
Yeah, you got that right. And of course, we don't know what it is. All I can do is, and I don't want to sit here and tell you it's this, because I'd be lying if I did. But what I can tell you is it's blessed me. It's helped others. I pray it comes. I was praying when it came the first time. Tim Taylor told me when it first happened to him, he'd lost his wife, and he had been working full-time at NASA as a young scientist, young engineer, renting a place, and his wife left him, and it broke his heart, and he went into depression. And in the middle of the night, suffering, this shadowy figure appeared at the foot of his bed and told him his first path. And he went right away, and he learned real quick that that information come from some other source, from some shadowy being. If it was all bad, why would it do that? If it was bad, why hadn't it eaten him already? Why hasn't it eaten me, or you? So it's something much greater than we can imagine. And we're like babies with diapers on only, climbing Mount Everest on our own. We're just starting.
Do you find that, like with yourself, that it starts with experiences where there's fear, they don't know what's going on, they're like, what's going on? And then suddenly when they get a regression or they figure it out, suddenly they become like messiahs, where they realize they have this message. And it goes from this fear to this sort of, trying to get the message out.
Yeah. But, in the Bible, and Diana Pasulka is one that told me this to begin with. In an angelic visit is a terrible thing. The Bible tells you that every angelic visit was not the nicest thing in the world. It scared people. Look at Jacob. It was supposed to be God that came down and wrestled with him and broke his hip. I mean, that's how you meet God. He breaks your hip, right? Wrestles with you all night long. Same way, Abraham sitting in the tent in the heat of the day, 3 men walks up and he recognized right away it was God. Who were the other two? Were they angels? Were they part of him? Who knows? But he said, go over to Sodom and Gomorrah and destroy the cities. And Abraham went to arguing with God. Please don't. If there's anybody there, spare them. And he argued all the way down. If there's just one, I'll save the city. That's what the Bible says, right? But God appeared as a human to him in the daytime. So surely the lady can appear as their spirits. I believe they're spirits, not physical beings, although they can appear physical. But they're like spirits, hence spiritual, right? I've always maintained that. There's some sort of spirit.
And I think more and more people are starting to realize that. You and I and other people, when we first talked about this kind of stuff, thought we were crazy, but you hear more and more people starting to, they'll say interdimensional, but they're starting to realize it's not what people thought it was. Even Jacques Vallée, I mean, it's like he said, this is absurd. Come on. I mean,
yeah. John Alexander, same way. It's not that simple as an alien. Wished it was, but it's not. It's just way too complex, and
wow.
We're on the tip of the iceberg, and I think we're going to all realize that over the next 3-4 years, we're going to all awaken to a truth, meaning they got to reset everything they teach. They're teaching evolution. That's got to change. The words, anything can create itself with enough time. In 1 million years, a car can make itself, or an elephant can make itself. What a lame answer, right? It's because they don't know. So now we got to realize there is an intelligent force around us that most likely created us, and suck it up, whatever that means. We got to change the books, and that's where we're headed, to an awakening of something that is a new world, the new age, the age of Aquarius. And I think the lady's coming back.
We're so lucky to have had the chance to talk to you, and your wisdom will be historic down the road.
Yeah,
Thank
I appreciate you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, the book is UFO of God, and it's a bestseller. Tell how it's actually picking up speed, apparently, right?
Yeah. We never realized that it was going to sell like this, but ever since it launched, it just started selling like crazy, and it's been in the 7 categories, either in the top 3 or 4, or number 1 in 1, or if not all 7, for the last 5 months. And where it's really trending is in the Christian faith community, and the religious faith, and angels and spirits, and spiritism, and all that. It's hit number 1 in the UFO book 3 or 4 times, but it's more in the faith category, in the UFO, and that's where the people are, And I think the world's in trouble. It's got to settle down with all these wars and everything that's happening, and fear and COVID. It shell shocked us all, and people are looking something good for a chance, right?
But the way I describe it is like this, especially to take your example, is that whatever mess we find ourselves in, perhaps people like Chris Bledsoe came into the world at this time in this place in the middle of this mess to do something. That for people it's traumatic, but there are people who are, it's part of their mission that they're here to, and that's what I think yours is that you're here at this time in this place for a particular reason, to try to move it the other way. So thank you for doing that.
Well, you know, I didn't ever buy into this, but I accept that because it's becoming a reality to me, because of the connection. It's the craziest thing to walk out that door right there, and suddenly here comes a orb from here and here and here, like children. They want to come up and greet me and come right over my head. Sometimes stop and burn like a flame right here, right over my head, or next to me, or around my friends. I've had 25 people here, and these orbs are flames all around us. And you see that, experience it, you got to realize something's happening.
Yeah, even in your regression, what remember they asked you, when did you first meet them? And you said they have been with me since before I was born.
Yeah.
Like this is all a sort of a plan. This is unraveling, and it may look random, and it's not random at all. It's all been planned to help the world at this time in the middle of this mess. So the mess is an opportunity for us to realize that we're not doing some stuff that we should be doing.
Yeah, and you know, I keep quoting Bible or history. Let's say I look at the Bible as a history book, a lot of it. Every 2,000 years, something major happens. Every 2,000. In fact, the ages, when Jesus was born, he was born under, they changed the calendar to day one, right? And it was under the sign of Pisces, the fish, since he got the fish symbol. Well, in the days of Aries the ram, the Sphinx is changed to the ram with a ram head on a body. And you had Abraham and the ram in the bush. You had the golden fleece in Greece, right? And it just goes all the way back to Leo the lion. You got the Sphinx and all these lion figures. But every time it changes, something major happens. And we're changing into Aquarius. And the lady told me, she said, the powers of heaven has shifted. The divine feminine is now rising and is going to come back into this world, and peace will come. But there's trouble ahead. And when this trouble subsides, peace will come to this world. And it'll be through the mother, the divine feminine energy. It's just what she told me. And I've told that 1,000 times, right? So, yeah. And so I think we're in for a big, a good time ahead. I think peace is coming, but there may be some trouble between now and then. And but I like to stay positive. I don't talk about any negative. I never will. I don't want to. It don't have to happen, she said. We can change all this if we just awaken. And I think that they're going to awaken us. Whether anybody likes it or not, they're going to do it. And they're doing it now. And if I was to pass away tomorrow, they'd take on somebody else. They're not stopping. It's happening.
That's like what I heard the story that John Alexander asked Jim Semivan when he found out. He said, "Okay, so who's running the show?" And you think it was like the government, and Jim Semivan said, "They are."
Yeah,
they're running the show.
Yeah, they're exactly right. And yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chris. Is there any other questions? We should let Chris go. And thank you. And if you get any material on this green thing, I would love to follow up on that. I think that is really significant in terms of the overall picture of how life actually works. Because that's what we're looking at is reality. How does we think we understand reality? We haven't got a clue. We're just putting names on stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, the green lights to quit, buddy. My sheepdog wants to go outside. He's been patient.
Beautiful. We'll let you go.
Yeah. I just finish this, Chris, and just say thank you very much for coming. Grant, thank you for coming and steering the ship here at the same time. I know almost all the people in this thing, I'm sure they're still hanging on here. Chris has been here since 6:30. That's 3 hours of talking. We greatly appreciate it. I thank Betty and Laura, who actually make a huge difference in keeping this thing going, and Bitsy, who is going to rejoin us next month. I just will say one last thing. I'm going to leave it to you, Chris. What's a last parting thought you'd like to leave with us for this journey we've been on tonight?
I would say, if I can give any advice to you, want to experience this in a better way, a more connective way, is to try to rid yourself of any negative anything. Don't look at negative stuff. Don't entertain it. Don't think about it. Don't watch the news if it bothers you. If you're into politics, that's the worst thing to get you all upset, right? Don't watch it. Turn it off, and only think positive, and treat others like you'd want to be treated, and open your heart and mind, and be humble, and just say, I'm here. I want to experience your presence. And I think you might be surprised. I can tell you this, reading my book, and we've been monitoring this. Even folks in the government wanted to know, if people was to read my book, would they start experiencing the phenomenon? And that's an emphatic yes. You would not imagine how many people's written me saying, oh my God, I read your book, it changed my life, and I've started seeing orbs. And so it's happened a lot, and a whole lot. And so that's how I would like to leave everybody. Stay happy and positive. And enjoy life while you're living now. Don't live in fear.
God bless you.
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate you, Mark. Y'all friends of mine for a long time, and I have the greatest respect for you both. And Grant and I have